Welcome to the third installment of the Director Dossiers podcast, where each episode we chronologically break down and discuss each movie in a director's filmography. My name is Johnny Cruz.
And I'm Danny Barker, and today we'll be opening the dossier on James Cameron.
Thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to see more of these retrospectives, you can like and subscribe on YouTube and follow on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you to everyone who watched the Paul Thomas Anderson episode. We hope you enjoyed this one too.
Early life. James Cameron was born August 19th, 1954 in Kapuskasing, Canada, to Philip and Shirley Cameron. He was the first of 5 children, and when he was 5 years old, his family moved to Chippewa Falls.
Yes, you better believe that there was much deliberation on how to pronounce Kapuskasing before we started the podcast.
I had to make sure.
Podcast.
The podcast.
So his dad was an engineer who worked at a paper plant, and his mom was pretty cool. His mom was a stock car derby racer lady.
Oh, shit.
And like
That's awesome.
And also she was in the Canada Women's Army Corps.
Damn.
So she was
straight badass.
She was Sarah Connor.
Yeah.
And but growing up, he was obviously like lived in a very rural, woodsy type area, and he would always be he lived like 5 miles away from Niagara Falls, so he was always in the outdoors doing nature things. But he talked about how, you know, there's not a lot to do out there, and you kind of want to build stuff. So if we were going to build like a plane or like a wooden plane or a tree house, naturally somebody would have to be the guy to go, hey, go get that wood, and that would be him.
Mm-hmm. He was just always a director. Initially, Cameron wasn't interested in school and was almost held back in the first grade.
Yeah, so one day his mom gets a call from the teacher, and she's like, hey, your son's an idiot. You gotta come in. And he goes in, and the teacher's like, yeah, your son can't read. So either Cameron or his mom gave him like a science book, and he just started reading it perfectly. And the teacher's like, "Duh." And then he's like, "I'm not going to sit here and read See Spot Run. Like, I want to read something cool."
Mm-hmm.
And then subsequently, I don't know how exactly like the change happened of him getting interested in school, but then he was like in 3rd grade, and I don't know if it was the same teacher, but then the teacher was like, "Hey, it turns out he's really smart. We got to bump him up."
Yeah, he's
and
just
then
gifted.
and then after that, he won like every single academic award. And he talked about he went to like a special school because he was like super smart. And he talked about how he was the first or the last one off on the bus. Like he had to drive an hour to school every day on the bus and then an hour back. But he talked about how he read tons of science fiction books on the bus. But the first thing where he was like, oh, wait, I might want to make movies is in 1968. So he was probably like 14. He saw 2001: A Space Odyssey. And that was a moment for him where he didn't know what a director was, but he was thinking to himself, oh, I want to do that. I don't know what and then after that, he just started putting making drawings of stuff, and then because he was a very good artist, just having drawings of things and then putting them on glass and then moving the layers of glass and then filming it with like a Super 8 camera, and he would, practice, I guess, practical effects and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then perfect timing. When Cameron was 16, his father told him that his work was transferring the family to Orange County, California.
Yeah, I don't know where Orange County is in California, but I think it's like right next to Los Angeles County. The story went that his dad was like, "Hey, I know you're going into your senior year, but we got to go to the Los Angeles. We got to go to Orange County, California." And he was like, "Can we go tomorw?"
Yeah, he just wanted to.
And then he went to California. He got homesick and he took a road trip or whatever, stuff like that. But while he was out there, he didn't immediately just like start making movies and get jobs on like film sets and stuff. He just started working blue-collar jobs, and one of the things he talked about was he was working as a truck driver, and he would go to the USC film school and then go into the library, and he said he would Xerox these doctoral dissertations on optical printing and film studies and everything like that. And he says, I was able to get a college education for about $120. He said dollars like that because he's Canadian.
I saw.
And that was actually my dad. My dad, the whole thing we're doing this podcast because my dad showed me the interview of him on Howard Stern, and I watched that, and then I started to watch, and then this was like 2 years ago, and then I watched all of his movies, and then I did the same thing for this podcast.
Okay, it says ask about the greatest James Cameron interview.
Oh, dude, I saw this at the 11th hour. I found this last night, and it says the title is James Cameron mid-80s talking about acid.
No.
And it's literally just a compilation of him talking about all of his acid trips that he had when he was like in his mid-20s.
That makes a lot of sense.
One of them, he talked about how he goes, yeah, so me and my wife and our 2 friends, we dropped acid by the Colorado River in the woods, And in my truck, there was a bag of 22 shotgun shell casings or whatever, because he was hunting rabbits months ago. And he goes, so we lit the fire, and just as I'm peeking on acid, all of a sudden I hear pew, and I'm like, what the hell is that? And then he keeps hearing it, and then like in an instant he just pictures, oh wait, the shotgun shell somehow got into the fire.
Oh my.
So he goes, get behind the car, get behind the truck, and then he just pew pew pew, and he goes, all of a sudden I had a bucket in my hand. I don't know where I got the bucket, but I just went to the water and I scooped up some water, and he goes, I crawled back up like
army style.
Yeah, exactly. He was getting shot at, and then he poured all the water on the fire, and the black smoke came up and like startled him, and then he fell back into the river, and they looked, and there was bullet holes just in his
everywhere.
truck.
Wow.
And just the thought, like, he could have just gotten dumped by
while you're on acid.
and we would never have seen any of his movies ever.
Yeah.
There's a couple more stories that were funny, but that was pretty good.
No, I mean, but going back to him being super gifted in school, this goes to a lot of his movies that we'll get into. It seems that a lot of the things that he went after in his movies were because of other things that he was interested in.
Right, exactly. Like one of the big things that happened to him when he was 8 is he started he found out how it exactly happened, but he found this brochure or this little pamphlet about nuclear war. And he was 8, and he talks about how I was just wondering. My biggest worry was getting home before the streetlights turned on, so I wouldn't get in trouble. And then all of a sudden, somebody told me that the world was going to blow up, and I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
So that's obviously a giant moment, because I guess every one of his movies is about an apocalyptic idea.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, he clearly loves adding nukes into his movies.
Yeah.
There's like how many, 3 or 4?
Directly nukes. There's Terminator.
Well, yeah.
Aliens talks about a nuke. The Abyss. Terminator 2. True Lies. Titanic doesn't have nukes. Avatar doesn't have nukes, but has a big explosion. Avatar, yeah.
Yeah. And then,
there's a correlation between nukes and the timeline of his movies, which we'll get to. The fall of the Soviet Union was 91. Cold War's over. Pre-Cold War, all of his movies have to do with nukes. Post-Cold War, they don't.
Oh, okay.
We'll get
so
to
it's
that.
just on his mind. And then when he was younger, he was obsessed with becoming certified as a scuba. He just wanted to be a scuba diver.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he made his dad take him to a scuba place in Buffalo
in the middle of winter.
Yeah, he got a scuba license in the middle of winter in Buffalo. It was just crazy. And then he didn't even get to go to the ocean.
Yeah, he never went to the ocean until he was like an adult man.
Yeah, that's nuts. Xenogenesis, 1978. Inspired by seeing Star Wars, the 24-year-old Cameron decided to make his own movie with his friends from Fullerton College. Randall Frakes. That's a shitty name. I'm sorry, that sucks. All right. Xenogenesis.
No, you should keep going.
Okay. Randall Frakes and Will Wisher. Both suck names. William Wisher?
William Wisher's a cool. Bill Wisher?
All right, that's fine, I guess.
All right, so he did that. So when he talked about when he saw Star Wars for the first time, and he had a sense, he talked about how it wasn't a sense like this could be done. It was a sense of, shit, somebody's doing this stuff.
Yeah.
Because he already had some ideas that he's like, I don't know how I would film this. And then he saw Star Wars, like, I better get cracking and bust a move. And he did go to college. He went to we met Fullerton College for engineering, I think originally, but then he changed it to English because he wanted to write stuff. It might have been physics. I don't know if it was engineering, but it was something like that. And I don't know how exactly he put this together, but he found like a group of dentists, like the Golden Fang from Inherent Vice, and they wanted like a tax write-off, an easy tax write-off. So they gave him $30,000. Him and his friends $30,000. I don't know how it works, but they gave him a bunch of money to go make this short. It was almost like a proof of concept for a feature.
Yeah.
So because if you watch the movie, excuse me, if you watch the movie, it's like a scene of it's not a short film. It's 12 minutes. It's basically a scene. So I think what the thing was, hey, we'll film a scene or two from the thing, and then if you like it, you can give us money to make a whole feature off of it. And it was supposed to be a group endeavor. But Cameron eventually just took over the whole project and stuff.
Oh, what with Randall Frakes and Will Wisher, who's supposed to be.
Yeah, they sat around and went, who has the best name? Who has the most normal name?
Yeah.
I never even thought about those being bad
I don't
names.
know
until you
why.
brought
I
it
don't
up.
know why I don't like Randall Frakes.
Well,
but
you better
whatever.
thank them.
Sorry.
Without
yeah.
them, we'd have no James Cameron.
Yeah,
movies,
yeah.
probably.
Mm-hmm.
We
But
wouldn't have Terminator 2. Will Wisher wrote Terminator 2.
did he really?
He texted me going, Terminator 2 is God tier.
It
And then
is
you talk
God
shit about
tier.
the
Oh,
man's
no,
name.
no. You're good, Will Wisher. I love you, but Randall Frakes.
I'm sure
guy.
he's watching.
He
All right,
will be.
what's
no,
next?
but no, yeah. It seemed like a scene. It's not. It doesn't have like a
Yeah.
full story to it.
Yeah,
It's just
in terms of actually having entertainment value and being fun to watch, it kind of gives me that weird existential crisis stuff I get when I watch old stuff like that,
mhm.
where it's like, this is making me really unnervous about reality and being alive. I don't know what it is. It's just how old, how old it is, and like how weird and crude. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we
yeah.
watched like a crappy copy of it,
Mhm.
but I do like there's some good callbacks to some James Cameron stuff.
Yeah.
There's this one tank looking thing that seems like a precursor to those tanks in the post-apocalyptic future in the Terminator, and there's also what I think is like a double precursor to the mech suit that Ripley uses in Aliens.
Yeah.
But also those weird little crab guys that go underwater in Avatar: The Way of Water.
Oh
It's
yeah.
sort of like the same thing. they
Yeah,
got going
yeah.
on.
That the whole thing, the theme to his directing is there, but it's not fully realized yet.
Right, it's sci-fi,
obviously.
but he doesn't have any of the. I mean, as far as we can discern from one scene, he doesn't have any of the the big themes that he has in his movies. There wasn't a bigger story to that because they were going to make a feature.
After the 12-minute film was completed, the dentist opted to not finance a feature film version of the story, but the film made a good enough calling card to land Cameron a job working for Roger Corman.
When you said the dentist didn't think it was a good move, they chose not to. I just pictured like 12 dentists with their arms crossed with like the weird mirror things they have on their head, just being like, "You suck, pal. The jig is up."
They're like, "There's no teeth in there. What?
Where's the teeth?
This isn't the movie we."
You forgot the teeth.
He was supposed to brush his teeth at the end, but at least once.
I thought Xenogenesis was a new toothpaste.
Battle Beyond the Stars, Galaxy of Terror, and Piranha 2. Cameron's first job working for Roger Corman was as a model builder on Star Wars ripoff called Battle Beyond the Stars, but Cameron was soon promoted to art director on the project.
So Roger Corman was known for this guy back in the day who had this big thing going on where he would make just these really cheap B movies that would be ripoffs of other movies and stuff. Remember what?
B movies?
He made the B movie. Do you remember there was a Fantastic Four movie that was made because they had to keep the rights and they had Roger Corman make it because it was never going to be released. They just needed to make it so that they can keep the rights.
Dang.
So they got Roger Corman to make it. It was this terrible little thing. Anyway, but he was a very influential guy. There's a lot of guys who worked for him, like Martin Scorsese worked for him, James Cameron, of course. And basically the gist of working for them is you're making these very cheap movies at these crazy hours. There's no unions or anything, so it's very much a guerrilla filmmaking, which Cameron talked about how he used on Terminator.
Yeah.
And so the first thing he did was Battle Beyond the Stars, which is the Star Wars ripoff. And originally, he was just a model builder, and he talked about, or Gail Ann Hurd, who was his producer, future wife at this point, she came in to like the model back behind the scenes thing, and he started showing her around. So here's this thing, and this. Oh, she's like, oh, so you're the art director? He goes, no, I'm just a model builder. I've been here for a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
But he was walking around like he was the guy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then Roger Corman, he had to make a ship. And he made a ship that had a very interesting design where they're both looking at it. Roger Corman's, huffing and puffing, arms crossed over this thing. And James Cameron's like, well, there you go. That's it, isn't it? And he goes, what is it? And then James Cameron goes, it's a spaceship with tits. And Roger Corman's like, all right, you're in charge of this vehicle now. So he got like promoted. And then there was another point where the original art director had to leave for some reason, I forget. But then Gail Ann Hurd woke Cameron up, who was sleeping at the studio, and just woke him up and was like, hey, you're art director now. He was like, all right, shut up. Let me go back to sleep now. Yeah, he was like, word. And then went back to sleep. And then subsequently after that, he was working on Galaxy of Terror. So in like 2 weeks, he went from just model builder to art director. And then Galaxy of Terror, he was working on production design as a production designer on that. And also during this time, he worked on some Skyline shit for Escape from New York. And so production designer for Galaxy of Terror, there was one point where he went up to Roger Corman and was just like, hey, let me be the second unit director. I want to do that now. And Roger Corman goes, all right, fine. Let's, there you go. You can do here's some stuff, go film it. And one of the things that he had to film was I think it was the actor Sid Haig, who I think was in the producers Mel Brooks' movie. I forget, but there's a scene where he gets his arm chopped off, and then there's maggots all over it and stuff like that, and he had to direct the insert for that scene. Second unit. Do you know what a second unit director is?
No.
It's
I was
basically,
about to ask you.
let's say I'm directing a movie, and there's some inserts of like people's hands and shit and some woods, and you go outside and get a skyline shot. I don't want to do that stuff, so I'd get you to do it because you're not as good as me.
Okay.
So anyway, so he's filming this scene. So what he decided was, all right, these maggots aren't moving when I'm shooting when I call action, but I need them to move. That's what makes it all creepy and crawly. So he goes, I took a wire and I put it under the dummy arm and connected it there, and then hid it away and buried it. And then I had a guy turn on the wire backstage. So I would call action, and the guy would turn on the wire. The maggots, the mealworms they used, would move like, oh shit, ow, 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 and then he'd go and cut, and they would stop moving because the guy would say. But there was these two producers behind him who walked in. He didn't know this guy, a video on Asinitis. I forget. I can't pronounce. He's an Italian producer, and they just saw a guy direct. They just saw a guy call action. The maggots move, and then he said cut. Yeah. They're like, what? Holy shit! So they hire him to direct Piranha 2.
Yeah.
But what happens on Piranha 2 is so he was replacing a director who was fired, right? James Cameron works on Piranha 2 for 10 days, and then they're in, I think, Jamaica filming it, and a video guy, the producer, is up in New York, and he's getting the dailies. Cameron can't see his own dailies. He won't show him, the producer. But the producer goes, hey, you suck at this, pal. You big mistake. You're an idiot.
Yeah.
It's not cutting together at all. And then he fired James Cameron. And James Cameron was like, oh, shit. Well, I thought it was pretty good, but whatever. And subsequently, I forget why he was in Rome again, but eventually he went to Rome where they were editing the movie. And he still remembered the code from when he got hired to the studio.
Yeah.
So he put in the code and then went into the studio and then looked at his footage, looked at the movie. He goes, that wasn't that bad. Like, that was pretty good. He goes, this is a terrible movie and it's trash, but if my name's going to be on a trash movie, I'm going to at least make it my trash. And he went in and just started editing. He re-edited the whole movie.
Yeah.
And he goes, I don't know if anybody ever found out that I did that but I'm saying it right now.
I think that I heard a few things where he did it while they were at a festival or something, like a film festival or something, and they caught him.
Oh shit!
And then they edited it back over what he had done. There's probably multiple stories about it. Who knows? The Terminator, 1984. Cameron had written a treatment for The Terminator. But when it was time to write the script, he enlisted the help of his friend, William Wisher.
Do you know what a treatment is?
Yeah.
Okay, what is it?
Don't put me on the spot like that. No, it's basically an early version of a script.
Yeah, it's like an outline, basically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So he came up with the original version. When he talked about he was in Rome. I don't know if it was around the same time he made the edits on Piranha 2, but he talked about he was very, very sick, and he had a fever dream where he had a dream of this fire, and then this chrome robotic skeleton came out in like a phoenix-like manner, and then he woke up and just started writing ideas down for that and stuff. And that was the original genesis of the Terminator. And he wrote the script, and the way he wrote it with Bill Wisher is he goes, all right, I'll get the first act and you get the second act. And of course, if we were writing a script, we can just go on Final Draft and we can see each other's edits in real time. But back then, they just had typewriters, but then they had no way of getting their things to each other on time. So they would call each other over the phone and be like, all right, so this is what I wrote today. Exterior, the Terminator's house. Day, he wakes up, has a glass of oil, and
glass of oil.
So that was interesting. But then they had the script. Once it was finished, it was a hot ticket item in Hollywood, and a lot of people wanted to make it. But one of the things that he did, which is similar to what Sly Stallone did for Rocky, where a lot of people wanted to buy the script, but he goes, no, I can't. You can't buy it. If you're going to buy it, I have to direct it. Sly Stallone was, if you want to buy it, I have to star in it. So Gale Ann Hurd came on as a producer who he knew from Battle Beyond the Stars, working for Roger Corman.
This is one thing I noticed. This is not about Terminator, but I feel like every woman he works, not every woman he works with, but a lot end up
we'll get to that.
His wife.
We'll get to that. We're gonna be, I mean, we'll get to that. I mean, we're going to talk about it with every single movie.
Every movie he has a new wife is kind of nuts.
Yeah.
This is interesting, too. Arnold Schwarzenegger wasn't the first choice to play the Terminator. In fact, Cameron didn't even want to work with him initially.
Right. So originally, Lance Henriksen, who plays the cop,
Yeah.
not the black detective, the white skinny guy. James Cameron wanted him as the Terminator because the whole point of the Terminator is that he was an infiltration unit. He's supposed to blend in like a chameleon. So it would make sense if Lance Hendrickson was the Terminator. There's a funny story where he was like to get the role, he dressed as the Terminator and wore sunglasses and acted like a robot when he went into whatever building he was meeting executives or whoever in, and he went down and they were about to call the police. Like, there's this guy, he's being weird.
Yeah.
This is crazy. And then Cameron walked in and was like, "Hey, Lance, my boy," and they're like, "What?" So that's pretty funny. But Arnold, so originally he wanted he wanted Lance Henderson, and Arnold's agents called Cameron about him playing Kyle Reese, and he goes, "I don't want Arnold as Kyle Reese. It's not going to work. I'm just going to." But the executives were like, "Go do this meeting." So he was like, "All right, I'm just going to go. I'll start a fight with him, and then we'll never talk to each other again. It'll be fine." And then he goes there, and then he just had a great time with Arnold. But they started talking, and Arnold was like, I kind of want to play the Terminator. And Arnold's agents were telling him, "Don't do a villain. You're going to ruin your career." And Arnold was like, "Shut up. I don't care." Yeah. So then he cast, and also he talked about, like, jokingly, he goes, "When did you know?" Howard Stern asked him, "When did you know you were going to cast Arnold?" And he goes, "When we went to lunch and he bought." And then I was like, "All right, nice."
Yeah.
And then he gave him the role.
Honestly, watching this and all of the other movies that he did with James Cameron, I feel as though I've disrespected Arnold Schwarzenegger as an actor.
Why?
I just always put him off. I just never thought he would, because I don't know why. I don't know why, but it's not like he's some amazing Leonardo DiCaprio actor. But
it's easy to underestimate him if you're not careful.
It's very easy to underestimate him just because I guess some of the roles he's been put in. And I guess as the Terminator, he's not required to give some amazing performance.
Yeah, well, that was a thing where the Kyle Reese role was like 30 pages of dialogue.
Yeah.
And he was like, "I don't know if I want to give this to him." And the Terminator only had like 6 lines. I don't even know what it was, but it was very little.
The Terminator opened on October 22nd, 1984, and became a critical and commercial hit, grossing $78 million worldwide off a $6.4 million budget. Damn.
I think originally, I forget the 2 movies that were coming out. It was Dune and another science fiction movie. What's so funny?
I just looked at the last point. I'm sorry.
Okay. He saw something funny on the paper that we're going to get to. But I forget what other movie it was, but everybody expected those movies to do well. And the release for Terminator, the studio wasn't really confident in it. They were like, "Yeah, whatever." And they the plan was just to release it for a week, and then nobody would ever talk about it again. But then it started to get really good reactions from critics, and the box office is really good. And I will say, when watching this movie, it's weird to watch what I'm seeing on screen, because I'm not used to, because I've seen this stuff so many times before in the movie, but it's weird seeing it be good, because so many shitty movies have been ripping it off for so many years that when I finally see the original thing that those movies are ripping off, it's like, why is this good? This is weird that it's good. You know what I mean?
What in particular are you talking about?
Like the gist of making a science fiction action movie and having, there's a guy that, this weird future comes, and then all the cliches around the movie and the way the action is choreographed and the music and the whole feel of the movie. It's like, this is what all those shitty movies were copying, you know? And I liken it to when I first watched Metropolis by Fritz Lang. That's a science fiction movie. And I remember seeing that for the first time and going, this is like spending my entire life watching 5th generation copies of a film. So like every time you duplicate the original negative of film, it loses quality. So when you get to like the 5th one, it's so it's a little cloudier and stuff like that. And then watching Metropolis is like watching the original negative. And I have a similar feeling when I watched this movie Terminator.
Would you say this is the OG? How is this movie classified? Is it a thriller / action movie?
Well, yeah, I don't know. Like, you talked about the OG. I don't know, like, the things that it's doing. I don't know if it was the first to do them. You know what I mean? But I do think, like we talked about in our Kubrick episode, when we watched Fear and Desire, which was Kubrick's first movie, you asked me, is it apparent that he was a genius watching it? And I was like, no, because he wasn't at the time. I mean, he was, but he wasn't as skilled enough. With Cameron, I don't know if what I'm watching if it, without the context of him being James Cameron, I don't know if I'd watch the Terminator and go, whoever directed this is a genius.
Mm-hmm.
But I would know that they're very, very, very talented, because the stuff he's doing, like the whole thing about science fiction, is you're taking the problems of whatever the contemporary world is at the time you're making it, and then depicting them in a future where they've reached their ultimate form or ultimate conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
So in the Terminator, in the 80s, the Cold War, right? The nuclear tensions were high, and people were talking about artificial intelligence, stuff like that. So people were anxious about this encroaching machine world taking over, and also about nuclear Armageddon, right? So what he does is place Terminator where the future is a company run by robots ends up setting a bunch of nukes off to kill humanity and take over the world, right?
Yeah,
exactly. So, but one of the things he does that I like is he kind of makes that future relatable, in the sense where he shows the precursors to the technology in the future. So that the beginning opens and we see these tanks and with the treads and stuff like that. And then immediately the first thing we see in the present day in 1984 is the hydraulics of this giant garbage truck. Basically seeing, I guess, an ancestor, one of the ancestors of the death dishing machines of the future. And then later in the movie, there's a scene where Kyle Reese is all sleepy in a car, and he's like, oh shit. And he sees a construction site, and he sees the treads on one of the construction vehicles, and he flashes forward to one of the big tanks. And he does a similar thing in Avatar, that kind of idea of like a precursor to this, or this is sort of the same as this. He does that in Avatar where, let me put it this way. In Terminator, he could have easily just went, oh, it's the future, so there's these impossible hovercraft or whatever. But in order to have that future resonate and feel real to us, he kind of shows you the lineage and the ancestry of the technology. In Avatar, he does the same thing with the wildlife on Pandora, where we don't see this crazy weird spaghetti monster in the woods. We see the Thananator, which is basically a panther, of the panther of Pandora. They have the dire horses, which are the horses of Pandora, right? So they're different, but we have something we can sort of recognize them as archetypically. And I think that's very, very smart to do for such a young director, because he was, I guess, 29 when he made this.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's really young.
He started when he was already. He started making movies when he was 24. What did you think about the movie and also the visual effects and how they held up?
So I love the movie. I mean, it's a great movie, and I was thinking about the effects, and it's sort of the same way with Xenogenesis, where it would be easy to say that it. Because obviously there's certain parts where it just took me out of it, as watching it as someone in 2024. Just like
also, that the future that it depicts is 2029.
Really?
Yeah. So we got 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. But so the effects are good, and this is where, with, say, the chase scene with the Terminator at the end, where it's stop motion and it looks a little, goofy at some parts, but then at some parts it's very stylistic. That's one thing that I feel as CGI, and I know that was stop motion though, right?
What, him running around
the
in the
Terminator,
yeah,
moving, but still, I mean, if it was done today, it would have been CGI most likely. Something that gets lost in the super advanced CGI now is that there's less style to it. You know what I'm saying?
I feel like a lot of the CGI seems hollow now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to say of just like these damn kids with their CGI today. I don't want to sound like that, but there is something about having, even if like something like True Lies, like the True Lies, that there's something off, but it feels heavier in weight. It has more weight to it because there's something real and practical behind it. So I honestly rather take bad practical effects than bad CGI effects.
Yeah, definitely.
And also, with the effects in general, it's hard because we really only see the bad visual effects. You don't really see good ones. Yeah, there's an excellent one where Arnold's. Remember the scene where Arnold's chasing them down the alleyway and they're going reverse in the car. There's an excellent visual effect where they had a stunt guy jump through the fire onto the car, and then Arnold had to punch through the window. But Cameron didn't like how the breakaway windows worked in movies where it just turns into all these little pieces. He was like, no, I want it to break like an actual windshield. So, but obviously he couldn't because he didn't want to break Arnold's arm. So what they had is they had this pneumatic arm or this hydraulic arm that would come through and just do that. And so Arnold had his arm behind his back and would just like move with the punch. The problem is he had to do it on top of a moving car, but the car couldn't move because the pneumatic arm machine couldn't move. So what they did is they had the car stationary. They had Arnold on the car, and then when he punched it, they had a truck with a bunch of brick on the side of it, like brick wallpaper, drive past the shot to make it look like they were moving, which is very, very intelligent. And there's like again, that's an engineering problem. There's like a blue collar sense. I don't know if blue collar is the word, but there's a blue collar way to his filmmaking where it's scrappy and we got to figure this shit out.
Yeah, and it plays to the style of it.
Exactly.
Which shows up in every one of his films.
And also there's another visual, like we talked about the opening miniatures. Those are a little dated.
Yeah.
Some of the miniatures are dated, but one of the miniatures that isn't dated, can you guess what it is?
I can't, no.
The truck explosion. I never even thought of that being a miniature. And then I saw the behind the scenes. I'm like, what? They made like a 1/8 scale of that whole street and the truck. And I had no clue that was a miniature. And that's another thing. That's an idea where that's never going to age. Because it was
That's
so
a miniature?
Yeah.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah.
I was trying to think in my mind, but I just know that all the post-apocalyptic miniatures look a little dated.
Yeah. Well, and there's even some in that still look like...
No, they still look fine, but,
right,
but it's just noticeable because,
yeah.
you know, I'm just too smart, I guess.
I love the thought of you watching a movie, like watching Terminator, and go, nope, didn't
can't
fool
get that
me.
by me.
Yeah.
Nope,
didn't fool
miniature.
Me. I didn't fall for it. That's such
movie
a funny,
sucks.
Just a guy going to a movie being like that fragile, just be like, didn't fool me, dude. Sorry. He's an actor. His name's Arnold.
He's acting.
His name's Arnold. He's not real.
Going back to the Terminator walking stop motion scene, that's still terrifying though.
Yeah, it still works
in
some sense, even though it's a little silly.
It looks silly at parts, but the parts that still look good, but you can tell it's stop motion.
Right.
It's still terrifying.
Well, there's parts because they go in between stop motion and like a real dummy. Yeah. Because what they did is they had because that thing weighed 200 pounds.
Just the head? It was just the head,
well,
right?
Remember, you know the scenes where it's walking around the factory and it's just the chest up?
Yeah,
and it looks absolutely great. Like, it looks like it could have been filmed today. It looks fantastic. Because they didn't do stop motion. They just had... It was basically they had the torso, and the sides of the torso were connected to these two poles. So they almost had like a stretcher, and they were carrying it on a stretcher and had to jiggle it in a way where it looked like he was limping. So they had like a couple of guys carrying it like they were carrying a stretcher, and it works perfectly. And there's stuff like that. I'm like, why didn't? I wish they found a way to do that somehow
the whole time,
rather than just do the stop motion. But at the time, it's hard for me to judge how good the stop motion was at the time. You know,
that's where there's parts where you think there's no way James Cameron looked at that and said it looked fine. But then but then you're probably thinking at a point he's probably like, we have to roll with it. Certain parts. I mean, the part where they finally get out of the building and they close the door behind and the Terminator is walking, that looks awful.
Right, yeah.
That looks terrible.
But also, we're saying that after we saw Avatar.
Yeah.
So we've seen Avatar going, nope, didn't fool me.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you want us to talk about the thing that you laughed at earlier?
Arnold's dick.
So they talked about that. I think I saw James Cameron and Will Wisher, talk about that, where Cameron goes, they assured me that you wouldn't be able to see when he's naked walking towards Bill Paxton and all those guys, those hoodlums. And you could just see his
it's just
and
out.
It's giant. Dude. It's just clanging around. And Cameron
that threw me for a loop. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, wait, what? Did I just see?
Yeah. It's like in Fight Club where all the people in the audience, when he splices in the picture into the films, and they're all like, what did I just saw something. It's weird. Something's not right. But Cameron talks about I was assured that we wouldn't be able to see it, but lo and behold, you can see his
very low.
Yeah.
Very low and behold.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the guerrilla filming aspect of this, because I saw.
Nice.
Sorry,
he dropped his headphones.
Just
for
saw
the
how they
time.
were talking about certain scenes where they had to. I think it's the scene where he first shows up to one of the houses and steals the car and punches the window.
Oh yeah.
He just goes, okay, get out before the cops come, and go punch that window.
Yeah.
It
was like almost what Kubrick did with Killer's Kiss, where he would just hand bills to cops because they didn't have permits, and he'd be like, "Hey, here's a 20, keep walking, pal." They'd be like, "Nice." They kind of had to do the same thing. And at the end of the movie, there's a shot. When Sarah Connor rides into the storm, she's in the desert, and the guy's like, "There's a storm coming," and she goes, "I know." And then she drives off, and you can see the storm. When they were getting that shot, they were waiting for the light all day, and there was not a single car. And then they didn't have any permits to film there. So then as soon as the light was right and they were ready to get the shot, a car pulls up, and it was a cop or something. And they had to convince the cop or whoever it was, or like a park ranger, whoever it was, that they were making a student film for one of their children.
Wow.
And stuff. And the cop was like, "All right, nice." And then I guess he saw the movie 8 months later and was like, "Son of a bitch.
Bastards.
Son of a bitch. I didn't even get a $20 bill."
Yeah, what the hell? And then this is one thing about this movie that this is one thing about some of the characters in James Cameron's films where I'm like, I feel like he makes certain characters just unlikable on purpose.
Like who?
So this one, her roommate / coworker
With the head, yeah.
And one of the first scenes where she goes, "Sarah, come watch this," and then she goes to the TV and it's Sarah Connor, mother of 2, dead, and she goes, "Look, you died," and it's like, that's horrible. That's not a good joke. What the hell?
Like,
mother of 2? You're making a joke about that? I
Somebody
remember
with your name just got murdered. Like, look how funny this is.
Hilarious. They have 2 kids. I was like, and then I think I feel like sometimes he does that just because he knows they're gonna get killed off eventually.
Well, did her roommate work with her at the diner? Or
I thought it was the same person. Maybe it wasn't.
I
can't remember, but I know that. I don't know. I think it was.
Yeah.
Probably.
Was she
it would
listening
make
to the music?
sense. Probably.
I like that. That was good when the boyfriend's like. I liked how the
That was
boyfriend.
a good scene.
I liked how the
scary.
boyfriend held his own. Like he didn't just get because usually in a movie you would just see a close of him going. Oh, shing.
Yeah.
But in that, I like how he kind of actually put up a fight with a Terminator. Somehow that was good.
Yeah, that was a scary scene because it's obviously the part where he just walks in and shoots the woman in the forehead, the first Sarah Connor.
Yeah.
That's when you realize, oh, this guy's got no remorse. I mean, I guess you realize that when he punches in the first scene through the guy's stomach and just rips his heart out. That's when all the scenes where he's killing someone, you're like, oh my god,
the action. There's not like a single action scene where I'm like, this is like it's still very satisfying to watch. There's like in Alien, we'll get to it, but in Aliens, when I watch the action, I don't get the sasatisfaction and the weight I get from it as I do from Terminator. But the chase scene, the scene in the club in Tech Noir, and the scene in the police station, like there's something so real and something that'll never age about it. That it works very well, and also the music, dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. Because this movie is what all the nerds who make shitty movies try to make when they make a movie for the first time. You know what I mean? Not to be mean about that.
Yeah,
I've made terrible. Shut up.
I was just thinking about.
But it's strange to see it good. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Aliens, 1986. The prospect of making a sequel to Alien came up before Cameron had even made The Terminator when he was in a meeting with 2 producers who he was pitching the projects to.
So what happened was, this was before he filmed Terminator. He had the script for Terminator, and he had to do a rewrite of it. And at the time, he was pitching other projects that he had. He had this one script called Mother. He had this other thing, and they weren't really, they liked the Terminator, which is why they had him in the meeting, but they didn't really like anything that he was talking about. So he goes, all right, whatever. And as he's walking out of the room, and they go, well, there is this other thing. And he goes, what? And they go, Alien 2. And he talked about how he just had all these things going, but he had to be like, yeah, I guess that could be okay. And so then they talked about, any ideas he had. So he's like, all right, shit, let me go write something. Give me like 3 days. So he, stayed up for like 3 days straight and wrote a treatment to aliens. And that derived from a script he wrote when he was working for Roger Corman called Mother, which was basically a very similar premise. Like I don't know if it was alien inspired, but it was basically a very similar thing that involved a queen mother alien thing or whatever. And so he turned that into Aliens or Alien 2 and then gave it to the producers, and they're like, nice, you got the job. Go write the script. You got 3 months. But then the problem was that same day, he also got the job to write Rambo. either the sequel or the first one. I'm not sure, but then he saw to do the rewrite for Terminator. So he had 3 months to write 3 scripts basically. So he said, all right. So what I did is I calculated, all right. So I have to write out 120 pages for one script, right? I have to do that 3 times. That's 360 pages. So then he divided that number of pages by how many waking hours he had in the next 3 months, and then he just wrote those pages per hour.
Oh my God. Wow. After the script was finished and pre-production officially went underway, Cameron realized that no one had contacted Sigourney Weaver about the possibility of returning as Ripley.
So he worked on the thing for like months, and then he realized that none of the producers contacted. He's like, "Are you kidding me?" And so then he had to go and talk to Sigourney, somebody who he's never met, and be like, "Hey, you want to be in the sequel?" And
didn't he quit?
So here's what happened. So he goes to Sigourney, and they have a conversation where she goes, "Yeah, I like the story, I like the script," but she had 3 requests. He said, she goes, "I don't want to fire guns. I want to die at the end, and I want to have sex with the alien."
She said that?
No, those were her 3 requests.
Jesus Christ.
Which he said all 3 he said no to, but she later did in subsequent movies. And so then the meeting went pretty well, and then as soon as her agents got involved, they're like, "We want big bucks, pal." And the studio was like, "Up yours." And then Cameron was like, "Well, shit. Me and Gail Ann Hurd are going to go get married. You guys figure this shit out. We're leaving the project, pal." And then that put pressure on everybody. And then what happened is when the deal still wasn't being made, he called Arnold's agent, who was working at the same agency as the guy who was Sigourney Weaver's agent. So he told Arnold's agent, like, "Yeah, I guess I'm just going to have to, they want too much money. I guess I'm just going to have to rewrite the script without her and just do the movie, whatever." And then he goes, I said that knowing that guy was going to hang up and immediately call Sigourney's agent and tell them that. And then within 12 hours of that phone call, they made a deal for her to be in the movie.
Mm-hmm. So she was just bluffing.
Well, it was her agents that were they were just trying to get more money. Mm-hmm. She got $1 million though.
Yeah.
Which is big. I mean, that's like, the budget was 16, 18.
It's like $1 million.
That's $1 million. It's almost like $1 million.
Okay, this Aliens was shot at Pinewood Studios in England, but Cameron did not get along with the British in-house crew.
I'll test your memory. Do you remember what Pinewood Studios is also significant for that we've talked about on this podcast?
That's where old Kubrick worked, isn't it?
On what movie?
A lot of his movies, right? He was in England. I don't know exactly. The Shining? Okay.
So the thing about that is usually like when you get a film crew, I'm better than you. So usually when you get a film crew, he gave me the finger. In America, also he was used to the guerrilla filmmaking where you put together a crew and you guys work long hours and you just everybody's all excited. But then he gets to England and they have this in-house crew where this is just another job for them, It's like if you have a band, you go out and do a tour with a band, but if you are doing a tour or something and you're a sound guy at the event at the stadium, you're gonna be like, "There's just fuck you. There's just another job." Mm-hmm. I curse. Sorry. Anyway,
I've cursed multiple times already.
So he talked about how he didn't like that crew because they were very slow and lazy, and they had all these union things where they couldn't work, and they had so many tea breaks. Or whatever.
Yeah, that was. Yeah. I feel like I remember hearing that was one of the biggest things. They wanted to take tea breaks all the time, which is so. I mean,
funny. Kubrick had the similar problem on Full Metal Jacket. There's a clip of him being like, "How many tea breaks is
Yeah.
But Cameron talked about how, he wanted to. He was used to working with a crew who was very passionate, and these guys were pissed at him because in England, since he was so young, they felt that he didn't deserve to be directing the movie. Mm-hmm. So, because in England, it's like you have to work for 30 years before you can get a chance at directing a movie, but he kind of just skipped all that. So they were kind of like, he's not a real producer. Your wife isn't a real producer. She's just on the movie because she's your wife and blah, blah, blah. And there was a lot of animosity between them. And he just wanted to help, so he would move lights around and stuff like that. But then they saw that as like a sign of disrespect, and he talked about it in an interview recently where he's just like, "Yeah, like I was just doing it because they work so goddamn fucking slow.
Yeah,
and I just needed to get the production, And at one point, I think it was the assistant director that he didn't get along with at all, and the assistant director just like went on strike against Cameron's crew, and he had to negotiate a thing where like, look, we're making this movie, blah blah blah. We're in this together. Shut up. Let's go to. He gave like an impassioned speech, and then when the production was ended, he was like, "Well, we finished the movie. I'm never coming back here. Thanks a lot." Mm-hmm. And
he said something like, "The best thing about the shoot is that I get to leave here.
Yeah,
You guys will all still be here forever."
and he never went back.
Mhm.
And they talked about there was like one time they walked on the set and just all the crew just dropped everything that they were doing and left immediately and went and because there was like a tea cart and they had the little sandwiches. We're talking heavy shit on the British right now, but it's I don't know.
I'll go get you some tea.
I'm bloody knackered, mate. You gotta be working 15 straight hours. You bloody bellend.
I could just imagine him being so pissed, though. I mean, it's kind of like if you're in the working flow and you just got to stop to go get tea.
Yeah, you're like trying to get a shot before
a certain time.
Before you lose. Well, they're working on set, so they didn't lose light. But you're trying to get the shot done before you have to put everything down and then get it the next day. And then these guys are like, no, there's tea.
Mm-hmm.
I can see how that's frustrating.
I remember there's another thing where after all the problems happened, he wanted to get everyone together to watch Terminator.
Oh, yeah.
He tried to throw like a nice little party for them, and nobody showed up.
Yeah, he wanted the crew because he didn't have the respect, and he wanted them to watch Terminator. Look, I know what I'm doing. I just made like this big movie.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't watch it. Or at least a very little of them watched it. I don't know.
We like you guys. We like you British people. We're just...
Most of the time. except that back in 1776, and you know what went there.
On July 18th, 1986, Aliens released in the U.S. to widespread acclaim and grossed $131 million off a $18 million budget. It received an A on CinemaScore. It was also nominated for 7 Oscars, including Best Lead Actress for Sigourney Weaver.
That was a big deal at the time because sci-fi, especially in the 80s, sci-fi wasn't really a thing that got nominated for the awards. Like the first thing was Star Wars. I remember Star Wars got nominated for Best Picture, and that was a big deal. But usually the prestige awards at the Oscars, sci-fi would get technical stuff probably, but they would never get the big. The 2001 wasn't nominated for Best Picture, so Sigourney getting nominated for an acting role was a big deal at the time, and it's still a big deal if somebody got nominated. It's still not a taboo thing, but it's still uncommon to see. And I think Cameron talked about how the success of Aliens must have driven the Pinewood crew like nuts because they were it was like they were actively trying to make it a shitty movie because they didn't like him because they don't care, I do like because it's interesting seeing this movie because this is his first sequel that he did, and now Cameron's known as the king of sequels because what you're doing with a sequel is you're taking the familiar premise of the first movie. But then, adding things and extending things and twisting it up so it opens up all these new possibilities and gives you a fresh perspective. And it's, So what he did on this movie is go, okay, so in the first Alien, there was one alien. Well, what if we do multiple aliens, right? Now, a lesser director would say that exact same thing and go, we're going to do multiple aliens and then that's it. But what Cameron does, because he's good, is go, no, we're going to do multiple aliens, but we're going to... Ripley's character arc isn't just going to be to survive again, right? Yeah. Her character arc is going to involve the survival of Newt, who's more vulnerable, and also we're going to add this new motherly aspect to those two characters, and that adds a big thing to the movie. And he also, like genre-wise, he doesn't. The first one was like a claustrophobic horror, but I've only seen it once. I don't remember it that well, but it's this very scary, claustrophobic, tense thing, right? Mm-hmm. But in this movie, he goes, no, we're going to make it. It's still going to be a tense thing, but we're going to make it an action movie, like a military action movie type thing. But I think there's stuff missing. I watched the theatrical cut this time. When I first watched Aliens, theatrical cut. Second time I watched it, special edition. And then I watched it again, theatrical cut, right? I think I like the special edition more. There was a lot of scenes from the special edition that I missed this time around because in the theatrical cut, which you watched, is we just see Ripley. Okay, so basically she's in space in cryosleep and they get her. And then they go, hey, what happened down there? She goes, we went down, there was aliens down there. And like, shut up, that's not what happened. You're an idiot. Mm-hmm. I added that, they didn't say that. But then the next scene we see her, she has a nightmare. And then the guy comes in and goes, hey, you were right, there's aliens there. We told you so, idiot. You didn't say that, we did. And then she goes it's very convenient how that happens, right? But in the special edition, there's a scene where they go, shut up, you're an idiot. And then she goes back to another room. And this lady goes, hey, since you were in cryosleep for 57 years, we're sorry to say that your daughter died while you were away. And it's that failure, I guess, as a mother to not be there for her child that creates this open wound in Ripley that is sort of healed or, I guess, nourished by making having Newt survive and having her live,
Mhm.
which is what makes sense. Her obsession with Newt makes sense with that scene, right?
But
it
adds a lot to that,
right.
actually.
And
now
then
that you said
it adds
that,
a lot.
Yeah.
And then there was another sequence where they had the colony. So basically Cameron was like, "All right, the movie's too long," and because anything over 2 hours and 20 minutes at the time was really long. So Cameron was faced with the choice of like, how do I cut 20? I can't do 20 minutes of just taking 10 seconds off of here or whatever. And his wife, Gail Ann Hurd, was like, well, just to get rid of Reel 3. And what was on Reel 3 was basically start of Reel 3 was go to the community on the colony. And they're living and they're going, hey, Bob, what's going on? Oh, we got a thing out there. The boss upstairs says he wants us to go check out this thing. And then you see Newt's family go out there to the derelict ship. Derelict ship? I don't know how to say that word. And they go out there.
Derelict.
And with the ship from the first movie, and the Newt's dad gets a face hugger on his head, and the Newt screams, and then back to Ripley, in on orbiting Earth, right? And those are basically the two big things that I remember from the special edition that I missed a lot, and without that mother scene, I still think the movie works generally, but the only thing we get without that scene in the special edition, the only thing we get of Ripley being a mother before she meets Newt is there's a great shot of when they see Ripley in the open. Also, speaking of the opening, how good was that fucking laser that they showed in the beginning that like scans the room?
Oh,
and there's this looks awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And
I love the way that the laser's going through smoke.
Yes, and there's like it's almost like a cinnamon swirl thing.
Mm-hmm.
It looks. I just want to just take a big bite.
bite.
So, but there's a great scene where that scene ends with an amazing close up on Ripley's face, and they match dissolve to Earth, right?
Oh yeah.
Basically associating Ripley with Mother Earth. These two, mothers floating through the stars or whatever. As I do say so much. So how do you like that line?
Dude, heck yeah, man.
That was a good fucking line. Actually, let me see how I wrote it down. I said associating the two images as a cosmic mother floating out amongst the stars.
Dude.
Yo, somebody call
Double
Nobel.
high five, man.
Somebody call Nobel. Anyway, so yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah. No. Now that you've said that with those two scenes,
Yeah.
I need to watch the special edition.
Yeah.
But just with the context of what you said, that does add a lot to it.
Yes.
I mean,
it's not that long of a scene.
Mm-hmm. It's not as though you can't tell that it's important to her, because you do get the sense. I mean, they say you've been in cryo sleep for 56 years.
57, thank you very much. Did you even watch the movie?
No, but that's my first thought.
Right.
Is whoever she knew before is probably gone.
Yeah.
But
she got interstellar.
But it helps to have that extra thing in there. Sorry to keep on this, but how do they show? So somebody tells her that. Yeah. That helps with that storyline of it. But it's still relatively strong.
What did you think about the movie in general?
I love it.
Because you watched it today.
Yeah, I know.
These thoughts should be flying out of your eyeballs right now.
Well, can I?
Yeah, just read off your notes.
So, this is something. There's certain parts of Cameron's movies where he likes to make military people look a little goofy, or just I don't know, like The Abyss. We'll get into, and this movie. I mean, like characters like Hudson. I literally wrote Hudson equals huge pussy, and the line that I related to most was when Sigourney Weaver's Ripley, she goes, "I'm sick of your bullshit, Hudson," because I had just written that down, and then she goes, "I'm sick of your bullshit," and I'm like, "Preach! Like, this guy needs to shut up." Well, because the whole time he's like, "I'm not scared no way." Like, he's that kind of guy, and you know. Cameron just setting this guy up to just die or something.
Well, basically the Hulk. I mean, the thing about I like his character. I don't think I don't. The reason I don't find him annoying is because Cameron talked about how Hudson is supposed to be the audience. Because when you get into the movie, because the movie takes a long time to get going. There's a lot of build up, and that's really hard to do and have it be, still captivating or compelling. But Hudson is us because we're so excited to get to the aliens and stuff, and then we get there and we're like, why don't you put her in charge?
Yeah.
Because the commentary for the special edition is very funny because it's Bill Paxton, Lance Hendrickson, Jeanette lady who plays the butch girl.
Yeah.
I forget her name. And
Are
then,
you allowed to say that?
what?
Butch girl.
Butch girl's not
I
a
don't
bad
know.
thing. But anyway, the whole time he's just so funny. He's like a comedian, just cracking them up all the whole time. And but there's some good stories where how he got into the movie, where he was friends with James Cameron because they worked on with Roger Corman together, and James Cameron was writing Aliens, and they're friends. And he saw him like at an airport or something, Bill Paxton, and he went, "Hey, you gonna write me a part in it?" And James Cameron was like, "Oh!" And then he, like, however many months later, he told him to come in, and he got the part.
Also, this is just like a random fun fact, but Sergeant Johnson from Halo is in the movie.
Who's that?
The sergeant with the cigarette or the cigar.
Oh, Alpone.
Yeah.
Apone.
Mm-hmm. He goes on to be Sergeant Johnson in Halo.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
He's not like Sergeant Johnson from Halo is designed after that character.
Oh, okay.
He must be. I mean, he has the cigar. He talks exactly like him. That's just like a random fun fact that I was like, oh, he wakes up from cryo sleep and just puts a cigar in his mouth. I'm like, Sergeant Johnson, what the hell?
That's a deep cut reference for all the virgins watching this podcast. Oh my God, he's from Halo.
Oh, dude, Halo. Yeah, that was me. That was literally me.
Anyway, is that all your thoughts on the movie? Let's talk about some action scenes.
Yeah.
So there's one of the scenes I like, or the shots is, and also the way they hide the fact that it's just a bunch of guys in rubber suits is very strong. And there's this, the scene where Hicks opens the ceiling grate, and he sees all the. So that's very simple. You think like, oh, how'd they get in the hang upside down? It's like no, he just had them crawl and then flip the image.
Yeah.
Simple stuff like that. But there's like the action, like in Terminator, like seeing Arnold blow up a bunch of guys is very satisfying. But in this, I don't know if it's completely satisfying just to see people flashing guns going, get some, and then just seeing a thing explode. I don't know, there was something missing that I think the movie has rewatchability, but there's something to the action that doesn't account for that. That doesn't contribute to that rewatchability.
I know what you're saying. I think maybe I might be getting this from like later movies, but there are scenes where maybe in the later movies where they like chop the alien's head off, like halfway through the head. Yeah. Like that would have worked a little better maybe than just the shooting the guns, but because I know what you're talking about, especially in that scene where they open the thing and then they all are caving in, and then Burke leaves them like a jerk.
Oh, but let's talk about Burke. So actually no, right? We'll talk about Burke in a second. I will say that the action in the third act is very, very good with the Queen, the Mother Queen. Fantastic. Oh, that suit fight is so get away from her, you bitch. Excellent. That's so great. And even the practical effects when she shoots the alien queen's giant egg sack, and you see all those egg. I think that was a miniature because you can see all the yolks, and I think they used egg yolks in that. But that was a great scene.
Yeah,
also, do you know how they film stop motion?
How they film stop motion?
Yeah.
In general?
Yeah, like what they do to make it stop. Because you can't just film. Because like if you're making this water bottle look like a building and it falls over, even if you're making it look big in the shot, even when it falls over, you're going to be able to tell because of the speed. So what they do is they shoot it at a higher frame rate, so you slow it down. So like the scenes of the boat in the abyss, where you see it splash into the water and then the water comes up, they're slowing it down to make it look bigger. Because if it's little, you see boing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No,
anyway,
that makes sense.
What were we talking about?
Sorry, you were talking about how some of the action doesn't necessarily hit as hard as Terminator, and do you think partially it's because they're aliens dying and not human beings getting shot?
Yeah, maybe you can't really have a guy, block an alien punch and then counter with a left hook. You know what I mean?
Yeah, not to those things because they're so gruesome. You just expect them to be stronger. I mean, Matt, it took the 3 people to get one of those
face huggers off of, that's a great scene.
Off of her. Yeah. That's face huggers
scene. And that's tense. This might be like the epitome. I don't know if this is true, but this might be the epitome of that kind of engineering, James Cameron blue collar filmmaking that I'm talking about, where the way they do like today CGI, it would just be, you CGI the face hugger wrapping its tail around the neck. But in the movie, what they do is, we just had it already wrapped around her neck, and then we just peeled it off and then played it in reverse, so it looks like it's wrapping around. There's like stuff like that's never going to age, but CGI it might. I think this movie is so impressive from a filmmaking standpoint, and watching his movies like this have really made me appreciate that kind of film. I don't know if I said this already yet, but watching James, and this isn't to diminish either or. But watching James Cameron's movies is like watching somebody solve an engineering problem, whereas maybe like a Paul Thomas Anderson movie or some Kubrick movies, let's say, not to diminish them. I'm saying this isn't saying one's better than the other, but those movies, like an Oscar type movie, might be more of an emotional or intellectual problem. There's something like, I don't want to say white collar and blue collar, but there's a difference that I can't really put my finger on.
Yeah, I like in that scene before when she's searching for Newt, and she's just walking through with the flamethrower. And instead, she could just be slowly walking through. Nothing's happening. It could be tense that way, but she's shooting the flamethrower. It seems like something I would do, too. Just shooting it at nothing, almost.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Or that scene where you find that the aliens are somewhat intelligent, where she points the flamethrower at the eggs, and that's another thing. That's another thing because she's dealing with another mother.
Yeah,
with Newt, like it's almost like, they're fighting over Newt in a sense, over who's the better mom. Bitch, I'm her mom. But then, you get the sense that the aliens are intelligent when she points the flamethrower at the eggs, and they look like
and
I'll do it.
The other
and then
ones
she walks
step away.
Yeah, but then she just goes nah, fuck, and then just.
Yeah.
She's just like, screw it, whatever, I'm getting the hell out of here.
She didn't have to do that either.
Another good thing is that the heartbeat sensor.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic.
How that plays into
the suspense and tension is so good because you can do it with like sound or whatever, but also just having that beep and then having them seeing them get closer, and it adds like a level of abstraction to where these things are. That's an excellent idea.
The beep is getting louder and louder as she's searching. You're talking about the beep and
both.
And the final scene where she has the tracker, and at one point, the beep starts to get faster, and then he inserts a heartbeat sound that's at the same pace. So it's building the tension the whole time. And
Interesting.
It's like a double whammy.
Like Cameron, they added a sound effect of the heartbeat.
Yeah, and it's the same. It's increasing with the beep as she's getting closer.
Right. Interesting.
So it's just like a double whammy on building tension.
Also, like another cool. This is like probably the most known thing, but when you look at all the pods of the cryopods at the beginning with the Marines, also the Marines, the way they talk is sometimes a little bit
annoying.
I don't know, like outdated in the sense that it's culturally inappropriate now, but like a way of they're like, ha ha. Even though we just did
kick
that,
ass, man.
Kick ass, bro. Sick, bro. Even though we just did that 5 minutes ago, and I made that excellent joke. But I do like obviously, this is technically a low-budget movie still, even though it was $18 million. But they only had enough money for 3 pods. Like
That's low budget for James Cameron, I guess.
They only had money for 3 cryopods. And Cameron was like, well, I want to make this set look bigger. How do we whatever? And I want to make it look like we have more pods. So I think it might have been Stan Winston who suggested just put a mirror, and then it'll reflect. So it looks like there's 9 cryopods, but in reality there's only 3, and that's very smart.
Yeah.
And stuff like that saves money, dude.
Yeah.
I think Orson Welles said, the enemy of art is the absence of limitations. Actually, no, Orson Welles didn't say that. I just made it up. I get credit.
Hell yeah. Kick ass. The Abyss, 1989.
Keep going.
The story for The Abyss began as a short story that Cameron wrote when he was 16, inspired by Jacques Cousteau's underwater documentaries. But Cameron wanted to take underwater photography to the next level by filming actors in a giant underwater tank complete with sets, lights, and sound.
Before we get started, a quick backstory of why you said The Abyss. When my parents saw this movie in '89 when it came out, and they were going, and that was before you could just pre-order your tickets. You had to go and actually interact with the person and say what movie you wanted to see. So there's this kid that's in front of them, and they go, "What movie do you want to see?" He goes, "The blue poster over there." And they go, "Yeah, which one is it? I can't see it from here." And he goes, "The Abyss." And the guy goes, "What?" And he goes, the abyss, because it was one of those words that he's never said out loud before. He only read it, and then they're like, "Oh, the abyss." He's like, "Yeah."
That one. Yeah,
pretty funny. So, you mentioned the little short story and stuff, and this movie came after Aliens. I remember watching an interview with him where the lady's like, "So what you're gonna do next?" He goes, "I think it'll be a rather small picture, like a more actor-driven, character-driven story. I don't want to do that." And then he ended up making The Abyss, the hardest movie to make ever. Well, dude, we'll talk about the. I mean, I guess we could just talk about the making of right now. So he wrote the script. It was based off the short story, and so basically what they had to do. There's a great documentary that you can probably watch on YouTube or whatever about the making, and I remember watching that for the first time. And I had no idea about the making of this movie because I watched it and went, "That was great, fantastic."
Yeah, it's
I watched the theatrical cut the first time. I'm like, "That's holy crap,
that's awesome."
And then I learned how they made it. So what they did is they wanted to film it underwater. They wanted to film the dialogue for underwater for the first time, which nobody had done before. And so what they did is they found in Virginia, they were looking for water tanks, and they found an old nuclear plant in Virginia, and they got this big. There was the bottom part of it, which I guess was like half constructed. There was it was basically a big giant hemisphere, and it can hold like some crazy number, like 1 million gallons. And on the same place, that was A tank, which is the biggest tank, and there was another thing they had, which was B tank.
The B tank was just like a lake, right?
No, B tank was a little pool that they had like on the nuclear base.
Okay.
And then but then they had like C tank, whatever comes after C, D, E, F. So eventually they were just filming stuff in like swimming pools and whatever. The more they were getting inserts with miniatures and stuff. But all the actors had to take diving lessons. Cameron was already a diver, so he was like, "I got this." And to block out the sun, they had a curtain, like a big giant black curtain over the entire thing, and then they also had these black beads at the top, where to block out the sun. So if you come up and get out, the bees just kind of go back.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So because because at that like whatever depth they were at, like let's say 10,000 feet, there's no light that goes there, so it has to be all dark. But when they were building the set, they had to build the set in the big giant A tank, and they were just like, "We have to fill this up. We have to get shooting." But they weren't done building the set, so they had to build the set as the water was rising and like finish it and stuff. And the first day of production, the crew gets there, and James Cameron just goes, "Welcome to my nightmare." He didn't stutter he said it. He said it properly, dramatically. He didn't stutter like I just said. He said, "Welcome to my nightmare," and they're all like, "Oh shit." So there was like, if they were down there, and there had to be safety guys to make sure, like, if something happened with their breather. So there was once James Cameron almost died, where every hour or so he had a guy that he hired to let him know when he had to change his oxygen. That guy forgot to do that.
Oh my gosh.
So at one point, Cameron realized that he was out of oxygen. So he goes, "Well, shit, I got to get to the surface." So he starts to take off his take off his air tank or whatever that was weighing him down, I guess, at that point. I forget, whatever. And then he starts climbing up. And then there was the safety diver who sees that he's going up, swimming up to the surface, but he thinks Cameron is just panicking because the whole thing is you have to decompress when you go up there.
Straight up.
You have to spend like an hour decompressing, but him going straight up is potentially dangerous.
You can die just doing that.
He can literally explode his lungs. But Cameron was doing a breathing technique where he was exhausting all the air from his body as he was going up. But the diver was like, no, come here or whatever. You can't do that. So the diver goes up to him and puts the thing, the nozzle on, and he does it wrong. And Cameron gets a big suck of oxygen. And Cameron just had to punch the guy in the face and go, "Let me." And he went up to the surface and eventually didn't die. Yeah. And then he fired the safety diver and the other guy who forgot to tell him to change the tank. But I know I'm going to ramble here, but this is the craziest production of all time.
Yeah. Keep going. That's
there
fine.
was Ed Harris. I don't know how they did this. He not only did he have to go underwater in this tank in a suit. There was at one point in the movie where his character was supposed to be breathing liquid oxygen. So that he had to have a tank, his helmet filled with water while he was underwater. So he would get a big gulp of air, and then they would close the thing, fill it up with this dyed up water with chlorine and shit in it, and his eyes would be burning.
Yeah.
And then they would do the scene of them tugging him along because they had to do it him when he drops down all the way to the obviously they didn't have the depth, so they just tilted the camera and he moved sideways across the thing. They pulled him on the cable, and he just did that underwater. And there was one day where they're filming the thing where he's next to the nuclear bomb, and there was a safety guy right over him, just ready. And he goes, all right, and he puts the thing up, and then the guy puts the breather in, and he puts it in upside down, so he gets half water and half air, and he starts choking or whatever. And the guy goes again, he goes, and he gets the same thing. And then the main, I forget who, I think it was Al Giddings, who is Cameron's friend. He was like one of the main diver guys. He comes over and pushes the guy away and puts the thing in Ed Harris's mouth, and Ed Harris doesn't die. That night, Ed Harris was driving home. Ed Harris, like the coolest, toughest guy ever, was driving home, and he pulled over and started crying.
When I first heard about the fact that they had to be in the water for 5 hours, I immediately was just thinking in my head, I'd quit. Yeah. Just being in the water for 5 hours sounds terrible. Right. And then also the stress of having to act and everything. It's just
you had to act there was a scene where Ed Harris and the other guy, the guy who finds Spider-Man's costume in the garbage in Spider-Man 2, that guy, I'm pretty sure it's the same guy. They have to go to different parts of the set under the water without a suit on.
Mm-hmm.
Because their characters in the movie have to swim across without their suits on. So they had to do that in real life. And there was takes where the safety divers were right outside of the camera. And there would be takes where they would be going up to get the air, and the guy just goes like this and goes, I can't do it. Like, I can't. And they just put the thing in his mouth, and then he starts breathing again. They have to do the takeover again.
So terrifying.
It's so, I don't know how. But and then they had to act while doing that still.
Mm-hmm.
They had to get like these new helmets and stuff. And also they had to decompress as well. So they had to spend like 5 hours down there, let's say, and then spend like an hour at the surface level water just,
doing nothing.
So what James Cameron started to do is there was like a window into this room where they had a bunch of screens or whatever. So while he was decompressing, he would watch the dailies that they just filmed, and then he would be on calls with like studio execs being like, "Shut up, I got this. Leave me alone, god damn it." Because I think it was going over budget. It wasn't like anything the budget was. Guess what the budget was?
$45 million.
It was $45 million. I would have suspected it was like the first $100 million movie, because you watch like the way. I remember watching this, and I had no idea that they were doing this shit underwater. It was crazy to me that they actually did this.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody talks about it like that much.
I mean, I remember when we first watched it, I go to your house. I said,
I go to your house.
I went to your house. What?
Why did you went, I go to your house? You said it like sliced alone.
No. I was saying, the first time we watched it,
oh yeah,
I was thinking in my head, there's no way this is 1989. I mean, it just looks too good. Yeah. I guess, it just was too real looking. Right. But I guess it's just because everything is actual.
Like, technically, I mean, in like engineering wise, technically it was ahead of its time. Yeah. I do think it was the first, at least I guess one of the first 21st century technical movies in a sense. The first movies with a 21st century feel to them, right? And thematically, it's not a 21st century movie. The special edition especially, because actually, before we get into our thoughts, let's read that next thing.
Mm-hmm. The Abyss opened on August 9th, 1989 to mixed reviews, and for the first and last time in Cameron's career, underwhelming box office, grossing $90 million off a $45 million budget. However, it won the Oscar for Best Visual Effects and was nominated for Best Cinematography, Art Direction, and Sound.
Yeah, so the visual effects Oscar is warranted. They call it the pseudopod, that little water guy that comes out, the water tendril. This still looks pretty believable now.
Yeah,
you don't watch that and go, oh, God, that's bad. But at the time, that was crazy. That's like that might be like the most influential visual effect that's ever been done. That was insane. Mm-hmm. And that was also the precursor to the T-1000.
T-1000, yeah.
So, but also the underwhelming box office, right? James Cameron said it broke even. People said it bombed. It probably broke even, especially back then. There was a lot of ancillary markets that were stronger back then than they were today. But I think one of the reasons that it probably didn't make as much money is if you look at Cameron's movies, I talked about in the Terminator movie, it's a very 20th century movie thematically with the anxieties about nuclear war and the encroaching machine world and stuff like that. And those kinds of that theme about nuclear war is present in the special edition, right? But in the theatrical cut, that a lot of that is cut out. So, for example, in the special edition, which I don't like as much, I will say that all the stuff they added in the special edition is the opposite of how I feel about all the stuff that was taken away in the theatrical cut of Alien. I like when I watched the special edition of Alien, I miss those scenes, or I'm like, oh, I love these scenes; these are great. But when I watched the special edition of The Abyss, I'm like, I don't know, maybe these should have stayed cut. So in The Abyss, in the special edition, they have a lot of allusions to the Cold War with the U.S. and Russia, and they have the TV saying like, "Oh, we're gonna do some nuke stuff. You better watch out." And they're like, "Oh shit, this is getting crazy." And then at the end, they have the NTIs, the non-terrestrial intelligences, which probably just should have called them non-human intelligences. We don't know that they're not from Earth, but they throw a bunch of waves at all the world's coastlines, basically saying like, "Hey, we can mess you up if you don't get your shit together." You know? What did you just do?
Sideways gun.
Oh, I thought you did the Hitler thing. I'm like, dude, what the hell are you doing?
Dude, what the fuck would I do that for?
No, you stuck your arm
I said
out.
this, like...
Okay, he did a sideways gun. Roll the clip. I just photoshopped Hitler's mustache on you. Anyway, so the NTIs go down there and they're like, "Look how terrible people are, though." And he's like, "What? No!" And it's like this really weird.
Yeah.
It's too schmaltzy for me, the whole thing. And then he goes like, "I made some new friends. They said we should stop killing each other." It's like, oh, did they? That's the answer, huh? Stop killing each other. Oh, if it was that simple. And I don't really like that stuff. But all that stuff was excised for the theatrical cut.
Oh, okay.
So basically everything that it has, all the connections it has to the 20th century thematically, were basically cut out of the movie. And I think that's the dilemma of it, because I think it makes for a better movie, but I think it could be one of the reasons why it didn't resonate with people at the box office, because maybe there wasn't an urgent sense to the movie since those themes were cut out of it. I don't know if that might be true.
In the theatrical cut, what is it that makes them stop?
Do it. So in the theatrical cut, they cut the waves out entirely. You never even see the waves.
Oh.
So basically, in the theatrical cut, obviously I mentioned, and also all the added scenes in the special edition are like, is that added? Where it's all these little technical scenes where I can't tell if that's if that was an added scene or not. So you can probably get rid of those. But then at the end, he goes down all the way to the bottom. The little alien guy goes, "Here, come on, I'll take your hand." What?
Just the way you went.
Oh, come on, I'll take your hand. I moved my hand weirdly. And he thinks it's funny. And then he grabs him and pulls him into the underwater ocean. And then they go down there, and he just says, "Hey, how you guys doing?" And then they play him texting everybody up there on the oil rig, going, "This is a one-way trip. I had to do this." And then he says, "Love you, wife." And then they go, "Hey, I'll see you later." And they basically saying like they saved him because he's a good man, right?
Okay.
And then they go up, and then they go back to the ship that the oil rig disconnected from, and they go, "Hey, Bud's alive? What?" And they see on the telly, he goes, "Hey, I got some new friends, baby." And then they're like, "Oh, nice." And then they go up on the big ship comes out of the water, and then they kiss, and it ends. And I think that's better because it doesn't have that schmaltzy shit to it, and it also takes away. I think the special edition takes away the focus from Bud and Lindsay too much, where it's like too much about this this the schmaltzy nuclear war stuff. Where I think in the theatrical cut, Bud and Lindsay's relationship is much more central to the movie, which I liked more because it was very strong. That scene where he's like, "Come on, you bitch, wake up!" and he's slapping her. It's like, that's crazy, dude. That's crazy performance. And also, but I think I think The Abyss might be Cameron's most personal movie yet. I guess I guess he's still making movies. It might be his most personal movie because Bud and Lindsay are basically a couple that are all but divorced, but they still exist as coworkers. And Gail and Hurd and James Cameron, while making this movie, were in the exact same position. During pre-production, she went off and did another movie, and then there was they had some weird conflicts, and they split up during the pre-production. But she was still on as a producer, so they still had to exist as coworkers.
Yeah,
and then I think they got divorced afterwards. Let's say, so that kind of speaks to Cameron's interpersonal life, basically. I think more so than True Lies sort of does that a little bit too.
Do you think James Cameron had to reach into a dirty toilet for his ring?
Oh my God! Yeah. So there's there's a scene where he goes into he dumps the ring and you explain it.
He dumps the ring
into the toilet
after they have a nice little argument. And he walks away, and he comes back into the bathroom, and he just obviously wants the ring back. So he reaches in to the toilet, which has this
like the blue
dye that's in porta potties and all this stuff.
Sanitizing shit.
And he pulls it out, and you think like, okay, that's fine. He gets the ring back, but then his hand is just blue the rest of the time. And he puts the ring back on, and it's
doesn't
all
even
blue,
wash it off.
And his hand is blue the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
He never, he could have washed his hand.
I realized at the end, because the first time I realized that when I watched it, and then this time around, I realized, like, oh, wait, I didn't notice it until at the end where he, like, touches her face and his hand's blue. And I'm like, dude, you're touching her with that toilet hand?
Yeah.
But also, the effect of, like, the pseudopod's vision is very good, and he uses that in Avatar.
Yeah.
When Jake Sully wakes up, and they're all stuttery stoppy. I don't want to think about. I think it's the shutter speed. They leave the shutter speed open for a long amount of time, so that a lot of movement gets all blurry.
Okay,
it's not.
yeah.
So, but that was good. But also Michael Biehn in this movie, dude, as what, Lieutenant Coffee or like Colonel Coffee? Colonel Coffee sounds awesome.
Yeah.
That sounds.
Colonel Coffee.
Dude,
I like
we
that.
should just make a coffee, and call it Colonel Coffee.
Yeah. Cut this out. Don't let them know.
we can't let them know. If you saw, we're gonna patent this right now. Don't you get
I'm
any
online.
ideas? You're the guy on the chair. So he's great in this movie. The entire in the beginning, what's her name? Lindsay goes, yeah, there's some effects. You get like psychosis down here from the pressure, and he's like, that's a bunch of baloney. And then his arm like shakes. He does like a Doctor Strangelove where he goes, ah! And
did you just do the?
No, I did. I was doing Doctor Strangelove doing it. I wasn't doing the Nazi salute. That was Doctor Strangelove. Don't you put that on me? I was getting off the rails.
What movie are we?
We're not going to survive this podcast.
Yeah.
So. But anyway, he's great, and then his arm twitches, and he's like, "Oh shit!" But then you just see him throughout the entire movie get more and more paranoid.
Yeah.
And I do feel bad for him. I do empathize, especially at the end when he's just you could tell he's just a super scared man who doesn't know what's going on. And there's a scene that we just started crying laughing at, where they're talking about the pseudopod, and he's like, "Yeah, it makes sense." And then they just cut under the table, and he's just cutting his arm, like, and nobody's talking about it. He's just
nobody cares.
God damn it, I'm cutting my arm.
Yeah.
But then the maybe what I think might be the most impressive visual effect is the way they show his submersible imploding.
Yeah.
I don't know how they did that. I'm sure it was a miniature, but like I don't know. Maybe they had like a vacuum in there that crushed. I don't know, but it was. But also they show him. They did a weird thing where they had because a lot of the submersible stuff is miniatures. The ones where you don't see them directly, like when the camera pushes in and they see them talking, that's a real submersible. But whenever you see them sort of like projected into the thing from like a distance, that's miniatures.
You can tell. I remember there was one scene where I asked you, "Is that a miniature?" Because the pod just moves a little quicker than it seems like it should have, and it just kind of looked like how a rock sinks to the bottom if you drop a rock in a pool. It's just like a little quicker than you would think. But it's nothing that really takes you out that much.
Right. There's literally, it's like maybe that shot and then 2 shots of one of the cranes that they use stop motion for.
Yeah.
It's a little squirrely. And only one of those is in the theatrical cut. I only remember seeing that once in the theatrical cut. So there's basically 2. I prefer the theatrical cut, so there's only 2 bad visual effects in the movie, basically.
Terminator 2, Judgment Day, 1991. After the underwhelming box office of The Abyss, Cameron wanted to make his next movie right away, and he got a call from Mario Casar and Andy Vajna from Carolco Pictures, who had just bought the rights to the Terminator franchise for $10 million.
Yes, I know what you're thinking. We did look up that is indeed how you pronounce that name. We're not going to tell you which name because you should know which one we're talking about. So
James Cameron.
Can you guess? Speaking of him, guess how much he got paid for this?
So they paid $10 million for the rights. So I'll guess $10 million then.
No, you're dead wrong. What an idiot guess. That's $6 million. Thank you very much. And also, we talked about how him and Gale Ann Hurd split up. So now he didn't have a producer, so he started his own production company. That's Lightstorm Entertainment, which is still making the Avatar movies. And so they originally greenlighted the budget to be like $80 million. What? Greenlit the budget for $80 million. 85 million, let's say, and then subsequently the budget kept going up and up until it was at 100 million. I think this was the first $100 million movie.
Wow. Is it really?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of other. Yeah, I guess so. What? It doesn't seem like that big of a production that it needed $100 million. I mean,
really?
No, yeah, I guess so. I mean, I don't know.
All right, great commentary.
Of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton returned for the sequel. However, casting the role of young John Connor proved difficult.
So the kid Eddie Furlong wasn't an actor. The casting director, I forget, her name was Mally something. She was James Cameron's casting director until Avatar. I think she died in 2005. And so she found Edward Furlong at a thing somewhere, like at a park, and she went up to him and was like, "Hey, kid, can you act?" Yeah, I know, right? Going up to a kid and go, "Hey, you want to act in my movie?" It's kind of weird. But she goes, "Have you acted before?" He goes, "No, shut up. I don't want to know anything about you. Get out of here, pal."
Did he really?
No, he didn't say that, but he was like, kind of.
I need a douchey little kid.
He was a little kid, so he was just like, "Screw, shut up. I don't care."
Yeah.
And then he ended up being in the Terminator movies, which is crazy. But also Linda Hamilton obviously got very ripped for this movie. And she was like, I think she probably would have been like the first woman character to do that. And that was before people got ripped for roles, really. You know, like nobody was working out to be in Batman or anything at that point. And she kind of got jacked. What?
Did you see Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator 1?
Oh yeah, dude. I heard he was working out his whole life to star in that movie. But anyway, Linda Hamilton got ripped, and there's a funny story where Arnold and Linda met on the first day when they were filming. I think maybe in the desert when they go to that hideout with her friends. And Arnold saw her for the first time and just went up to her and said, "My God, Linda, you're ripped to shreds."
You were kind of just talking about how this was like an early version of someone getting ripped for movies.
Well, also, if you look at her in the movie, she has a fantastic performance in the movie.
Oh yeah,
and she goes through a lot of stuff. But a lot of a lot of in the press, like all of her press junk and shit was like, "Wow, you got ripped, huh?" Which is good, but people weren't really talking about how good her performance was because she had to be insane in the beginning as a mental patient, and then she also had to be a loving mother, and then at one point she had to become the Terminator, which we'll get to, and then she had to do the thing in the beginning of the Terminator with the big factory fight at the end, right? Mm-hmm. So she had to go through a lot of different stages. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Let's go to the next thing before this conversation gets stale and people start clicking off. If you're thinking about clicking off, don't do it. Stop. No, don't. There we go. Stop moving. All right.
For the CGI of T-1000, Cameron enlisted ILM, the visual effects company behind the landmark pseudopod CGI in The Abyss.
So originally, we talked about how in the original Terminator, Cameron wanted the Terminator to be the T-1000, the liquid metal thing. Yeah. But of course, he was thinking, okay, I have no idea how to do this. Stop motion can't get this done. So he basically made the Terminator, the T-800 Arnold instead of the liquid metal thing. But when he was, writing, he reunited with Bill Wisher, who I think has a great name. Yeah, unlike some people in this room.
It's grown on me.
So they wrote the script together again, and when they were writing, they were just playing around, going, "Wait, we can throw the T-1000 in there."
Yeah, that's awesome.
And they weren't even sure if they could still do it at this point. He went to ILM and was like, "Can you do it?" And they're like, "Definitely," as they shook their heads.
Yeah. It'll only take 35 people.
Yeah, it's only going to take $100 million.
Minutes of film.
Yeah, exactly. So that was actually like a big giant leap. And he already had a big giant leap in casting Eddie Furlong because he was like, this kid, I don't know. Yeah. It's a $100 million movie, and I'm just casting this kid who's never acted before. That's kind of a crazy thing. And then we're also doing this thing with the CGI that's never been done before, except into the pseudopod. But that was one scene, not the whole movie.
Very risky movie, honestly.
Yeah,
it's
every single one of his movies, basically.
Yeah. But the specific scenes where he had. It's amazing that he had to film it, like the first scene where or the first chase scene. Where the T-1000 walks out of the flames. They had to film that and just say, okay, we're going to add that in later. Just the thought of that and be like, yeah, we're going to put in a effect that we don't even know we have yet in that.
And even to this day, like you look at that shot and then another shot of him turning back into Robert Patrick from the Liquid Metal, and you really, I mean, I guess there is no line if they filmed it in the manner that you said, but you really can't see the moment where he becomes Robert Patrick.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, is now when he's are they cutting to Robert Patrick now?
Awesome.
It's like it just blends in. It still works very well.
Still, I think
it's not like, you could obviously by today's standards they can probably make it look a little bit better, but you don't watch it going, oh yeah, this is from the 90s. But people look at this movie and they go, oh, the CGI. It's like a lot of the T-1000 is practical effects. Like every time he has knives for hands, which is a funny thing to say. Somebody has knives for hands. That's like practical thing. He actually had to wear stuff like that. So today he would just throw his arm around and they put some like a CGI sword
and the
in later.
bullet holes.
Those were practical.
Yeah,
yes,
they were
and
practical little things that like exploded
like
on them.
the same way squibs, like blood squibs, like erupt in movies. They had those like these flowers of metal, just like erupt on it through his. It's fantastic. And again, an engineering problem. But there's a lot of stuff with T-1000 where, for example, you know the scene where he goes "Hasta la vista, baby," and he shoots somebody. So when they did that first take, he exploded outwards because they basically had a hollow version of, I forget the exact substances and materials that were used, like whatever urethane shit.
Oobleck.
What? So they had like a shell of the T-1000, and then inside they had a bunch of bits and pieces that would explode. First take they did it, and it looked like it was exploding from the inside rather than a bullet was going through it. So what they did, and it also was too smoky. So what they did is they took a fan and they pressed the fan down at super high speed so that the smoke would stay down, but also the pieces would go straight down. So it looked like he was breaking apart. And that's a crazy engineering thing that works very well. And even when they have the doubles of people, like you know the scene when they go into the building and there's the double of that guy. That guy just actually has a twin.
Yeah, I know. That's so funny.
I didn't know that.
And Linda Hamilton has a twin. It's crazy.
But also speaking of Bill Wisher, who has a great name. The commentary with him and James Cameron is so funny because it's kind of like this podcast where I kind of just don't shut the fuck up and you're trying to get a word in and I'm like, yeah. So James Cameron will talk for 20 minutes and then Bill Wisher is like, that's a very important thing about the Terminator franchise is that, Sarah Connor is a deeply troubled woman, and then James Cameron goes, "Oh yeah, here we had a tube that was connected to the helicopter, and then he jumped on, and then he would just Bill Wisher, and he's like, oh, cool." Like Bill Wisher would never get a word, and it was so funny. That's a great comment. All the commentaries you can find on James Cameron, the Alien Special Edition, the Terminator Special Edition one are available on YouTube. You can watch those. Those are great. You get the deep dive on I love commentaries.
On July 3rd, 1991, Terminator 2 opened to critical acclaim and massive box office, making $520 million off a $102 million budget. Audience gave it an excellent A+ on CinemaScore. It was also nominated for 6 Oscars, 4 of which it won for Best Sound, Sound Editing, Visual Effects, and Makeup.
So that movie, we said the budget was $100 million. Adjust that for inflation, it's $200 million. Adjust $500 million worldwide. That's $1 billion. They basically made it's like a $200 million movie making $1.1 billion today, which is very impressive.
That's nuts.
And I think the reason I talked about in Aliens, where you do the twists to make the sequel work and stuff like that. I think probably Terminator 2 is the epitome of that philosophy. Where in the first movie you had a little guy who was the good guy, and then a big guy who was the bad guy, and the little guy was a human, the big guy was the Terminator, right? But then in this movie, you have the little guy who's a Terminator, and he's evil. But then you have the big guy who's a Terminator, but he's good now, right? And now you're going to have two Terminators fight each other. That opens up the possibilities for like plot-wise, from a plot perspective, but also from a thematic perspective. Because in the first Terminator, I talked about how it was about an encroaching machine world and stuff like that. And in the first Terminator, it suggests that like the path to the path is a linear man to machine. There's no crossover, right? But in Terminator 2, it says, well, maybe the future won't be man to machine. It'll be man and machine, because you have Arnold, or the T-1. I'm just gonna call him Arnold.
Yeah.
You have Arnold, who we saw in the previous movie is a robot, but throughout the movie, he constantly wants to learn to be like he shows an increasing curiosity about humans. Like, why do you cry?
Yeah.
He starts to learn and act like a human. The kid humanizes him a lot. So you see the robot become human, And then with Sarah Connor, where she has that dream of the nuke blowing everybody up, and she goes, "Oh my God, I have to do this." And she goes to Miles Dyson's house. She becomes Arnold from the first movie. She's hunting down a human to prevent something from happening in the future, right? And then you see her become the Terminator. She even has the laser pointer, the dot laser that he has in the first movie. And she's about to. The thing that stops her from killing him is that she gets up close and personal. She tries to kill him from a distance because he's just a silhouette. But once he sees that he's like a guy with like a family, she's like, "Shit, what am I doing?" So the lines between human and machine start to blend in a very interesting way, and I think it blends in an interesting way, and it's nuanced in a way that I guess was missing from the other Terminator movies, like Terminator Dark Fate. I've only seen that once, and it was a few years ago, so maybe my memory of it is a little bit faded. But the things that they do with human and machine and that is just an extent. It's like a very silly and confusing extension of what we showed in this movie. So in this movie, we have Arnold learning how to be human, being more curious. And then in Terminator Dark Fate, they have him named like Bob or some shit. Like he has a name. And then he has a family and a wife, but he doesn't have sex with them. And he's sort of like this weird robot stepdad. And it's like, this is what? Like it doesn't make any, but there's nothing new that it adds. It's just taking that idea to its logical conclusion, which isn't that interesting, really, So yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen many of the other Terminators, actually. Is there even a point after Terminator 2?
Well,
I mean, be honest. Like, is there an actual?
Not really. Not from even from like a sociological perspective. There's not really either, because the whole thing about the Terminator. I mean, I guess you can make the argument that it's still like the fear of mechanization. You can still make an argument for why they're still relevant. But I talked about like Terminator 2 came out. I think it was July. What was it July 3rd, 1991? Right. The Soviet Union collapsed in December 91. So right after this is the last Terminator movie where the Cold War was on, right? Essentially, and so the fear of nuclear Armageddon was still at a high point. But then after the Soviet Union collapsed, you could say that the two maybe the last 100 years, the two main anxieties that humanity has had is nuclear Armageddon and now this climate change, climate alarmism stuff, right? Now, the Terminator movies. The 90s were sort of like the 90s and the early 2000s were a weird time because it was a transitory phase where the world was looking for a new threat, and we'll talk about how True Lies kind of represents it grasping for like a new threat, right? But what's the point of doing a Terminator movie about nuclear war, like after the Cold War? It doesn't make it like maybe now you can make an argument that it's getting a little bit more relevant again, but you're gonna make Terminator 3 in 2003.
That's when it came out, really.
Terminator 3 came out in 2003.
Yeah.
And none of them are good anymore. And I'm not saying they're not good because of that specific finite reason, and that's why I have the answers to everything. That's just a part of it. Why, that's just you can tell. Like, and also James Cameron moved away from the nuclear stuff, and when I described earlier, you could slash his career right down the middle. And that's when the Soviet Union collapsed.
But also,
I sound like a conspiracy guy right now.
No, well,
let me know if this makes sense in the comments. I don't know.
I think it does. I think it does because a lot of other things that James Cameron does reflects what's going on in his life and what's going on in actual life.
Right.
But also, my thing about like Terminator 2 is actual god tier movie.
Yeah, you texted me.
Why
and you went,
go on?
Shit.
Why even try to make anything past it? It kind of like resolves it.
Well,
like, obviously like disregarding the money stuff.
Yeah.
Like the story is told.
Yeah.
And I think James Cameron would agree with that. Actually, Judgment or Terminator 2, the story is over. In my opinion, and it caps off in a perfect way because. At the end, it shows the machine caring. It learns enough to where it thinks, oh, I should care about human beings.
Right.
Which is sort of a good message, too, because it's seen today with AI and machines that the only problem with AI that can, one of the main problems with AI and machines is if humans program it the wrong way.
Right.
AI, a big problem with AI today is if you teach it AI to be racist, it'll be racist. but you have to keep those kinds of things out of it. Yeah. So, in the end of Judgment Day, I keep calling it that. It's just Terminator 2, whatever.
Say T2.
T2. At the end of T2, he ends up caring about human beings because the kid basically teaches him to.
And also, so you watched the theatrical cut. Where'd you watch it on?
Apple. No, I don't know. I can't remember. I think it was just.
All right. So there's a special edition where they have a few added scenes, and the special edition, if Aliens is the example of the special edition I like most, and The Abyss is the special edition I like least, then Terminator 2 is the special edition that lands right in the middle, where I missed all the scenes of like him teaching Arnold how to smile and stuff, and then them going inside of his head and turning on the button for him to start learning and stuff. That's all good, but there's an ending that shows Linda Hamilton in all this bad old lady makeup, and she's like, "I'm good now. John's a senator, and we're fine." And that adds like a super amount of closure on it. And I don't know if that's canon. But I do think it does leave Terminator 2 does leave the franchise open ended, because once they cut that ending, they didn't have an ending. So Cameron was like, "Shit, what do we do?" So he found there's a shot of the Cyberdyne Systems building. When they first show that, it starts on the yellow lines of the road, and then it pans up to the building. And he goes, so we took that shot. On the head of that shot, we had 9 seconds of road before we panned up. So I just put that on the end and had Linda go, "The future's a dark road. We don't know where it's going to go." And I think that's I think with the special, I think the best version of this movie is the special edition scenes between Eddie and the Terminator and them like bonding and stuff like that. And then without the special editions ending and just having the theatrical cut ending.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that leaves it. That's a good ending because she still doesn't know what the future holds, right. So, yeah, the definitive ending, I don't know how much that worked. I didn't see that, so I can't really speak on it. But I like the way it ends, where she's saying, "I don't know what the future holds, but it's almost like I hope we did enough."
Yeah, I think it's better. Like I think the special edition ending, it kind of is like the Abyss ending, where it's kind of a little bit schmaltzy maybe. But let's get to your overall thought. Like, favorite action scene, go.
I like how he blew up a fucking building.
Yeah, that was
for
pretty
real. Good. He actually blew up a building. But my favorite action scene is actually the first chase scene
in the LA River.
In the LA River, because it just reminded me of GTA so much.
Yeah, exactly.
I felt like I was just playing GTA. And the first jump scene, the motorcycle jumps off. Do you know how they did that?
I don't know. Maybe with
he was
cables
just attached to a crane.
Who, Arnold or
no, it was
the kid?
Stunt man.
No, I'm saying which character?
The Arnold when he jumps off.
Well, there's I don't have the answers of how they did that, but I have a funny anecdote where James Cameron was like, he had to do it. There was a shot where Arnold comes around the corner, and Cameron goes, "Hey, Arnold, can you come around that corner just a little bit faster? Can you get the bike to come out like a little bit faster?" And he goes, "Not with me on it," because he was like, "I'm gonna fall off. I can't do that." So he's like, "All right, that's fine." But I one of the things about the LA River scene is when the truck gets scraped off.
Yeah.
When they were filming that, they realized, "Oh shit, this bridge is too low. It's gonna hit the truck." So they went, "Well, why don't we just make it a convertible then?"
Nice.
So then they just cut it and then had him drive through, and that became part of the scene. That's like that's like the adaptive engineering type filmmaking that I'm starting to appreciate with him. And also, you talked about when they were blowing the building up, when Arnold goes with the minigun. There was a company that like owned that minigun that they rented,
nice.
And so they had that scene, and it was in the script that he just drops it, and the company goes, "Does he have to drop it?" And he goes, "Well, what? The Terminator's just gonna put it down? Like, he's done with it. He has to drop it." And they were like, "Oh," he's like, "I'm gonna drop the gun."
Yeah.
And they're like, "Shit." It was fine. He didn't break it, but still, it's like they were just.
I thought you were about to tell me he left it in the building by accident, and then they blew it up.
I don't know if they blew up. I don't know if they blew up. Maybe it was just the facade of the building that they blew up because it was under construction.
They
really
blew up from what I remember seeing, I'm pretty sure they blew up the building.
Yeah, that whole
level of the building.
Okay, because that building was being built, and the structure of it was, and then they built the sets inside of there.
Mm.
But Yeah. Oh, but also like we talked about the action in Aliens, how it's like a little bit the action in this. This is like because Terminator is still scrappy and it's crude and it's rough around the edges. It still works, but this is like the most polished version of what he could do with Terminator, and it works so well.
And I like how much weight the T-1000 has. Every time it's moving, it's clawing onto something. It's just ripping into it. I love it.
It's in the
on
like
cars
the
and
way
everything.
he has this weird ambiguous air to him, where he's just like, "Do you have a picture of John?" Like something's weird about this guy, because the whole movie is kind of subverting your expectations of like, oh, is he the good guy maybe, and Arnold's still the bad, and then it turns out, otherwise, and it's really good. And also just showing that the T-1000 is stronger, is better than Arnold. Yeah. Is such a what would you call it? It's such a great way to because it's if you have two Terminators fighting each other, it's like watching Black Panther fight another Black Panther where they're both indestructible. It's like, but now that this one's better than him and that he can be destroyed, and how he does get destroyed at the end is very, very good.
This is worth mentioning, but you know how he clones the one security guard and then sticks the thing through his forehead? I remember vividly being young and seeing that movie for the first time, and it was just like on TV, and I saw that part, and I remember having like a sympathy pain for the first time in my forehead, just being, oh, what?
Dude,
why did that
those
happen?
hit hard.
Yeah, those
like when
moments.
you're a kid and you see something horribly violent. I remember I saw a movie where all these people were on a boat in like this ballroom, and the whole thing was like booby trapped, so that this razor wire would slice through everybody. And I saw that when I don't know what movie that's from. If you know what movie I'm talking about, please let me know.
I don't know what movie it is.
I remember seeing that like for days, just being like, and also when I saw The Incredible Hulk for the first time, I was in the theater, and it was when he was he was like beating up all the guys, and I'm just sitting there going,
yeah.
In that in the soda factory. My mom goes, "Do you want to go?" I literally just went and nodded my head without talking. Also, it's refreshing to see a big budget movie where it doesn't have any cringe humor at all. Like, nobody in this movie goes, "Did that just happen?" There's one thing where this might be the first movie for somebody to go, "Guys, we got company." Because you hear that in every movie now, but this might have been like the first one to do it. But the humor in this works very well, especially between Arnold and Eddie, where he goes, "Don't kill anyone," and then he just blasts that guy's knees, cripples him for life. He goes, "He's alive, isn't he?" So good. And then even the scene where Linda or Sarah Connor has that what's that blue liquid that she puts in the syringe, and she goes to threaten the psychologist who returns from the first movie, and he goes, "Don't worry, she's not gonna do it. Don't open the door." And she goes, "You guys are already dead in my head. I will do this right now. You're already dead to me." And he goes, "Open the door." Like, that's really good. A lot of movies have stolen that too. I think in Wild Hogs they do a similar thing with Dudley, William H. Macy, where he goes, "If you don't come out here, we're gonna break his legs." He goes, "It's okay. I'm a computer programmer. I don't need my legs." He goes, "Fine. Then we'll break his hands." He goes, "Bring the money." We should do an episode on Wild Hogs, dude. James Cameron. Let's just make this about Wild Hogs, the most dad movie of all time.
I love that movie. But then even just "Hasta la vista, baby."
Yeah.
He just learned that. And using it. Just funny things like that. That's one of the notes I said. Just the funny little references that show he's actually learning. But he doesn't realize it's,
Or how awesome was it when the T-1000 goes into the lava and he starts like folding in on himself and like changing that's not even just from a realistic animation standpoint, that's impressive, but even from just conceptually a design of just like showing a guy's face like contort into itself over and over again is super impressive, especially for 1991.
I thought when I watched it, I thought the last thing he was going to turn into was Sarah Connor. That would have been, and she would be looking at it like,
Yeah. Well, there's a something that was deleted from the theatrical cut in the special edition is they show after he gets blown up and reassembled, and the way they had the liquid mercury that comes back together. Fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that scene.
So after that, he starts to malfunction where everything he touches, he starts to replicate. So like he'll touch like a desk and his arm will like start turning into the desk and he has to be like that. So there's a scene, the shot where there's two Sarah Connors. In the special edition, they have that shot and then they see John look down and you see one of the Sarah Connors' feet is like melted into the floor grate.
Oh,
and that's how he tells which one is which.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was interesting too.
That's cool. But then Sarah Connor just comes out and blasts him with. I like the choice of using a shotgun. I feel like that's super fitting to make the impact with the T-1000 even better.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, and I like how the impacts are different. Where if you shoot him with a shotgun, he gets blown back and his head slices open. But if you shoot him with a pistol, it's just pew pew. It's like paintball.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
oh, that's a good detail. And I talked about the action in the Aliens, how it's not that satisfying. Where it's like you just see a guy shooting and then you see something. It's like not that satisfying. But in this, there's such weight to every single bullet. The opening scene. Or not the opening scene, but the first scene with Arnold where he's all naked and he walks and he goes, "I need your clothes on your motorcycle."
Mm-hmm.
And the guy's like, "Kiss my ass, bitch." And then he goes to stab him and like his arms. That whole sequence is fantastic. And the way the guy falls into the grill and goes, "Ah, shit."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
his arm, like, there's so many like little attention things to do. Because now in a movie, like if they have Thor, like, why am I shouldn't be complaining about movies but the new Shazam movie that came out last year, he's Superman. And the only thing we see him do that like represents his powers in any way, we just see him kick Helen Mirren into some concrete and the concrete breaks. Or we show a guy punch regularly and then we just show the metal denting. It's like, what happened to Man of Steel when these guys are going poo 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 poo? Or like, do something with action.
Yeah.
Why can't they were doing this in 1990, 1981? Why can't you do this today? Why can't you be creative with the action? God damn it.
We need more of the boys kind of stuff where
Yeah, dude.
it just runs through a guy.
We need more boys in Hollywood. Is that what you're saying, Danny?
No, dude.
So what you're saying is you don't want girls to direct movies because Wonder Woman is a terrible movie. Apparently, I'm making a joke. I like Wonder Woman.
So that nuke scene.
Yeah, the nuke scene. So I don't know exactly how they did it. You can make some assumptions of like how they did it practically. But James Cameron in the commentary talks about how he goes, "Yeah, I got this weird letter after the movie came out, and it was from the National Nuclear Scientists Foundation or some bullshit. And they thanked him for showing the most accurate depiction of a nuclear explosion on screen ever." He goes, it was nice because I got some some recognition for this, but also it was terrifying that it was accurate.
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, oh shit, this is gonna suck if we get blown up.
Oh yeah. The
Because you think a nuclear explosion, it would just be instantly you're dead, but if you're at a certain moment, you're gonna get hit with that initial heat, and then you're gonna burn, and then you're gonna burn. That's like a terrible death.
I know at least the nuke itself, the cloud was a miniature, and then I think all the buildings were also CGI overlaid with miniatures. Like there were miniatures, and then the CGI went through, and they slowly added it in and like knocked the buildings down.
Oh, so like they demolished the buildings, like the little ones, and then to simulate the CGI wave going through. Okay. That's cool.
Yeah. It was like I think it was an actual shot of the city, and then the miniatures were the like broken down parts. And they did like a shock wave, and as the shock wave goes, they switched the film.
Oh, okay, I see what you mean. Interesting.
I'm pretty sure that's how it was.
Well, the ending basically is an echo of that scene, because it's like the same thing. She's at a park and she's like, "Oh, there's no, I'm not getting burned alive right now." Nice, dude. That's basically the gist of
the special edition.
It's basically the ending when she's all old. It's basically her. It's an echo of the scene where she gets blown up because there's kids at the park and she's with her, and John's playing with her kids, her grandchildren, and she's just like, "Oh, isn't it nice not to be getting blown up and ripped to shreds right now?"
The Crowded Room and Strange Days. After Terminator 2, Cameron wanted to make a smaller, more intimate movie and decided to adapt The Minds of Billy Milligan by Daniel Keyes, a book about a rapist in Ohio who suffers from multiple personality disorder and whose lawyer successfully used his mental illness as a defense for his crimes.
First try. There we go. So basically he wrote the script and he was ready to make it. And during this time, so he wrote the script and made a deal with the lady for the rights. Okay, I forget the lady's name, but she was like a restaurant owner in New York, and he bought the rights from her. And then, like a day after he did that, he signed a $500 million deal with Fox to make his movies, and she sued him because, like, under false pretenses, where if she knew, she got paid like $250,000 for the rights, right? But if she knew that he was going to make that deal, she would have asked for 1.5. So she sued him, and then it's basically in his words were basically what was it? I'm gonna open the book and then we'll figure out. Cut. So she sued him for 1.5, and then he said, "I don't negotiate with terrorists or extortionists, so I told her to take a flying fuck and collapse the project."
Damn.
And he never made the movie.
Nice.
You can put that back.
That's kind of epic, though.
So, yeah, so that movie was never made. And then Strange Days was a script that he wrote. I forget exactly the reason why he wrote it, but basically it was a story where it was sort of a thing where your life is kind of being streamed. I forget the exact premise of the thing, but it's different from what he wrote now because Catherine Bigelow, who was his wife at the time,
Dude.
What?
He has like 10 wives.
Yeah, so then he married Catherine Bigelow was his third wife, and he wrote the script to Strange Days, which was this weird futuristic thing where basically it was a shrinking of overall privacy that people have. It was sort of I guess, what would you say, oppression of the world today, where this technology and this constant streaming of our information is kind of cornering us and putting us in a box. And then Jay Cox came in and rewrote the script. He's a screenwriter who's worked with Martin Scorsese a bunch. And then she ended up making the movie. Apparently it was a good movie. Why are you looking at me? Is it because I said Jay Cox?
No.
So the movie came out, and off a $40 million budget, it made $8 million. So it bombed.
True Lies, 1994. It had been a year since Cameron signed his $500 million deal with Fox and still didn't know what his next project would be, until Arnold showed him a French movie titled La Totale. This is a farce about a secret agent whose family thinks is a boring fella.
He's a secret agent whose family thinks he's a boring fella.
Yeah.
And basically the premise of the movie that kind of intrigued Cameron was, what if James Bond's family thought he was boring?
Yeah.
Because he couldn't tell them that he was a secret agent. Or what if James Bond had a wife or had to answer to his wife, something like that. And during this time, he founded a company called Digital Domain, which was basically his visual effects company that he wanted to make his movies that he would innovate. So he basically his plan was to go, I want to make the pseudopod in the abyss, go figure it out.
Yeah.
And so that was True Lies was their first project. And we'll talk about it later, but the visual effects in True Lies are insane. The first bad visual effect turns up an hour and 55 minutes into the movie.
Which is?
We'll get to it.
Okay.
Stick around, folks.
Mm-hmm.
What's the next thing on there?
Cameron originally had pictured Jamie Lee Curtis in the role of Helen Tasker, but Schwarzenegger vetoed this idea.
So I don't know. I don't know the specifics on why he didn't want her in the role, but Cameron wanted her, and then Arnold said no, and he was like, "Are you sure?" And he's like, "Yeah." So he was like, "Shit." And then he started auditioning a lot of other actresses, and then he saw on videotape, he got a copy of a Fish Called Wanda, which was a John Cleese movie with her in it as well, and it was a comedy. And he watched it and went, "Oh my god!" He sent it to Arnold, and he goes, "Watch this." And then tell me she can't be in the movie. And then Arnold was like, all right, she's in the movie. So I guess they were impressed with her comedic chops.
Mm-hmm. Was she super well known at the time? I'm sorry, I don't know much about.
I don't really know how. I guess A Fish Called Wanda was probably a big movie at the time. And she was an A-list. She had to be an A-list star because Halloween had already come out.
Yeah, I guess
so. Yeah.
True Lies sparked controversy upon release. Some critics labeled the movie misogynistic, and the National Council of Islamic Affairs boycotted the movie for its portrayal of Islam.
So we were talking about the scene before we did the podcast about Jamie Lee Curtis dancing.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to talk about why we were talking about it, but that scene was interesting because a lot of the male reviews that had a problem that were calling it misogynistic. A lot of the reviews that were calling it misogynistic were from men. Like Roger Ebert was like, "This is crude and it wasn't funny." And then another guy was like, "This is misogynistic." Blah blah blah, but it was but the people who kind of liked it tended to be women who were like, "No, this is funny and empowering. What do you mean? Shut up." So that's interesting. I'm not going to speak on that. I've thought about that scene for 2 seconds. I'm not going to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. 2 seconds.
I know. But then the Islamic thing. So I talked about when I was talking about Terminator 2, where after the Soviet Union collapsed, a lot of we had to figure out what the big new threat was, right? And a lot of people were looking to terrorism in the Middle East, and that's I guess Cameron did that, where he still had the nukes in the back of his mind, and then he merged that with the terrorist thing. And I don't know how much that landed, because if you look at the movie today, nobody talks about it.
Yeah.
It's a strange artifact in his filmography, because it's a big movie that it was the biggest movie of all. It was the most expensive movie of all time at a point. It was $120 million, and then it made $378, which adjusted for inflation is like $700 million today. So this is a prominent movie, but nobody ever talks about it. And I think the reason for that is probably because, again, Cameron had to find it existed in this weird transitory phase where there was no nuclear Armageddon anxiety that he can latch onto, and there was no climate anxiety that he can latch onto. So he had to find this new thing, and he found the terrorists. And I guess that maybe that wasn't handled the best way possible. I think in retrospect, maybe it wasn't handled the best way possible, because when 9/11 happened, Cameron talked about there was talks about a sequel to True Lies 2, and he said, yeah, we dumped that after 9/11 because like suddenly terrorists weren't funny anymore.
Yeah.
Because there's I don't know. It's a tough thing that I'm not really well versed on.
I think it's just like a weak. The villain is a little weak in the.
Yeah. Well,
it's not weak, but no, it's weak. I'm gonna stick to that.
It's
I'm
not
stand on that.
For some reason. It didn't stick culturally.
Mm-hmm.
That mix,
mm-hmm.
and I guess maybe not pressure, because I'm not well versed on the anxieties of that exact, like when people were concerned about nukes in the Middle East, right? Because that was a big thing in the early 2000s. When America was lying about WMDs. But I do think it's interesting that he went to this, because I guess after Terminator 2, I can do action. I know it. I'm the best at it. What can I do that's challenging? Maybe an action, like a blockbuster comedy is a very, very hard thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Those are typically not that successful. So maybe he was like, well, if I do action comedy, that's a genre that's might be very difficult to pull off. And not only, because to pull that off, you have to operate on such a thin margin. And it's so difficult to do that. And then he casts Arnold, who is already a very particular actor, and you have to use him. You have to use him in a similar way as you use an action comedy. Basically, I'm not saying that he's a inherently comedic presence. Like, people make fun of him sometimes because of his accent, but like there is something that, like an action movie, like True Lies, he has the presence of an action movie, but there is something sort of funny about him. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, like he's an idiot or anything. But there's something that's just, a little out of the ordinary.
Yeah. No, I think this goes back to, I mean, if you look at the vibe of all the other movies that he did before this point, the vibe of this movie is just totally different. Yeah. It comes off way different. Mm-hmm. There's no dread. There's no, there's action, but there's no thrill in a sense, like aliens are attacking you or Terminator's going to get you. It's just totally light-hearted compared to the other movies, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and there's no, but there's also there's no dread hanging over the movie where the world's like, there is, because there's a terrorist with his daughter at the end that has his daughter and they're hanging from a plane, and we'll get to how they filmed that, and you'll never guess it. And but also when I first saw this, I said how it's weird because until very recently, you couldn't find a good copy of it. It wasn't available on streaming. You couldn't rent it anywhere.
Oh, really?
And when I first watched it, I had to get it. I think there was maybe a Blu-ray on Amazon that was really expensive, but I had to get it from the library on a DVD that was from 1999. So I watched it on this copy that was like 480p. So the little box took up like a third of my screen, and I had to zoom in manually to watch the movie. So I watched it at like a very low quality, but the audio was still fine. And even then, I was still like, this is really, really good. But what I said is, when you're watching a movie and the characters in a movie go to watch an action movie, this is a good version of that movie. Because there's a lot of bad movies that are a movie that feel like a movie inside of a movie, and they're very bad, and that's why they're really bad. But this is like Cameron going, well, what if I want to make a movie that the characters in my movies go and watch at the movies that are also good movies?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No,
I said movies about 15 times. Hopefully that makes sense. But and that's what I really think is such a hard thing to pull off, and especially when you're working at a budget of $120 million. That's a giant risk. I don't think people realize that.
And there's still, within all the action, there's still really funny comedic beats that take, and they don't get in the way of the action somehow. They just perfectly fit into, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
He slides it in there perfectly.
Yeah, there's no there's no Black Widow going, we're still friends, right? Depends on how hard you hit me.
Yeah,
like, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And, but, oh, shit, I had a good point, and you ruined it. Oh, the comedy. The visual comedy, I think, maybe not on par, but it really gives me some, like Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton vibes, where, because they're doing all the visual comedy is still practical. How do I explain this? A lot of the big stuff that they're doing that is funny is kind of funny in the same way Buster Keaton does a stunt, and it's really funny. You know what I mean? There's a similar thing, like a Charlie Chaplin-esque thing, where Helen, when Harry tricks her into thinking that she's doing this big secret op, and she's like undercover as a prostitute, and she's dancing on the pole, and she grabs the pole, and then she slips and falls. Arnold during that scene is all cool in the shadows, and they didn't tell him that she was gonna fall. She went up to him and was like, James, should I fall? And he goes, yeah, do it. And then Arnold, in real time, went like this, and then realized that he was out of character, and then went back as she got up. And it's a perfect
works perfectly.
It's so great. And that's such a great joke, and there's no him going, that just happened.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah. That little jump that he does
is so
perfect.
Good. And like him just like hitting when he goes, give me the page, and he just he just punches his hand through a car window, and Tom Arnold's like, oh, okay, whatever. You know?
It's his car, and he's just
yeah.
There's so many other ones though.
The guy with the head in the when he puts his head in the urinal, and he goes, you need to cool off.
Yeah, and then he goes, sorry about that. And the guy just leans out. He's like, he's just taking a poop.
You mentioned you didn't like the horse jump thing.
So stupid. That was dumb. That to me, like, I mean, it wasn't dumb, but like,
you're saying it was too dumb for the context of the movie?
Yeah, because even just the bike making it across doesn't make sense in my mind.
Yeah, that looked a little cheesy.
I'm just in general, like, I'm not a huge fan of like when things don't make sense in a movie. When everything else kind of made sense throughout the movie, and then he gets like 20 feet of buildup, no ramp, and just can clear a however long
a city street.
You know, I accidentally just
yeah, he did the Hitler thing again. Playback.
No, but that
for
was.
those who don't know,
stupid.
he was describing the jump and accidentally did like the Hitler salute thing.
Oh God!
Accidentally. In quotes.
Shut up. No, but like that, and then for some special agent to be thinking a horse can jump it.
Yeah.
I was taken out, and that one instant, that was the only time.
You mean. This movie felt like the precursor to Get Smart. Get Smart's a great action movie. It's a great comedy action movie that I love, and I think this gave me a lot of those vibes of True Lies and Get Smart. And I talked about the vertical takeoff and landing jet. First of all, the scenes with those are fantastic, and we got to talk about some of the choreographed stunt work they did in this, which is insane. So the bridge, the bridge sequence when they blow up the bridge, right? So that was when there's in the Florida Keys, you could actually see this bridge in the GTA 6 trailer.
Oh yeah.
And so they have the new bridge on the 7 Mile bridge is called. They have the new bridge, and then they had the old one, right? And so what they did is they originally had the cars on the new bridge to make it look like that's where the scene's taking place. And then sometime in the scene they switched for all the explosions and stuff. Yeah. They switched to the old bridge. You don't really notice because you're all hopped up in the action. But So when the planes come and shoot at the cars, they had a jet flying, and then they had the helicopter camera following the jet perfectly, and then they had explosions in the water that were set off when the truck would reach a certain point on the ramp, and then the truck would blow up at a certain point as well. So it was 4 different things that all had to be timed perfectly. And that's a crazy thing that they had to do.
Yeah.
And then when they blew up the bridge, the shot of the missiles hitting the bridge and like blowing up the truck, and then the truck flips over, that was a miniature.
Wow.
So they built that. That was like a 1 to 18th scale. Let's say, I don't know what it was. It was like 100 foot long. They built this bridge, this little portion of it, and they built the truck so the frame was really weak, so it looked bigger, and obviously it was in slow motion as well. But then when they go back to real life. When they were filming it on the bridge, there was a section of the bridge that was taken away because there's a little. I don't know what you would call it, but you know when like there's the part of the bridge it's like it rotates so that boats can get through.
Yeah.
There was that on the old bridge that was taken down, so there was just a gap in the bridge, and they just put a bunch of debris and smoke in there and made it look like that was the part of the bridge that was blown up. And then they actually drove cars off of it and shit afterwards.
Yeah,
when
that's
Jamie Lee
awesome.
Curtis got pulled out of the car and shit. That's insane. That was actually Jamie Lee Curtis hanging.
For real?
I don't know when they pulled her out. That might have been the stunt lady. I think that was the stunt lady. But then the shot where she's going like that. James Cameron, the dude, there was a scene there was a shot in Terminator 2 we didn't talk about.
What?
The shot when the helicopter flies under into the tunnel.
Oh, they
did that.
No.
And in the car because they had to do it twice because they had to.
Who's the
We're going
helicopter
back to Terminator
driver?
2.
Who's
So-
the helicopter driver?
I forget the guy's name.
Pilot.
I forget the guy's name, but he was the guy who was riding the helicopter, and the T-1000 went get out, and the guy
Yeah,
jumped out.
yeah.
That was the guy who did it. So
The guy who jumps?
the guy who jumps was the guy who flew it in through the tunnel.
That's awesome.
So they had to,
He's
he had to do it
awesome.
twice.
Mhm.
So Cameron told the guy. So they told the camera guy, so you're gonna do this, and the camera guy's, I'm not doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
So Cameron's like, fine, I'll do it. So they had to get a shot of the helicopter from the front in the car, from the camera car, and they had to go behind the helicopter as it did it. Insane.
That's
Back to
crazy.
True Lies. So that was Jamie Lee Curtis hanging because James Cameron, the camera guy, was like, I'm not going to do that, and he was like, James Cameron was like, fine, I'll hang out of the helicopter and get the shot. And then so Jamie Lee Curtis was actually screaming. She was just like, oh my god, shit, I'm flying in the air. So that was pretty good. But the scene with can you guess how they filmed the plane moving around the building?
Did they actually just do it?
Mm-hmm.
That's nuts.
They took the plane. They had a mock-up of the plane, and they hung it from because that building that they filmed that was under construction. So they had the big yellow crane at the top, like in GTA. Why are we associating everything with GTA this episode? And then they attached the plane to that crane, and then put Arnold and the girl onto the plane while they were swinging around.
That's terrifying.
Insane. Also terrible, but I have to bring it up. The stunt guy on this sexually assaulted the daughter.
The fuck? Like during the movie?
Yeah, during the movie.
What a fucking piece of shit.
Yeah.
Jesus
crazy.
Christ.
So that guy hasn't gotten any
yeah,
work lately.
obviously.
I forget his name. We should dox him.
Yeah.
No, don't do
screw
that.
guy. But wait, can we talk about go back to the bridge scene because like another comedic beat. They are about to shoot the missile, and he goes, "Hey, these rockets aren't gonna blow up that nuke, are they?" And Arnold's character just goes, "No, this should be good," and then he just goes.
He gives a look to the guy like, I don't know. Like, why would you just say that?
Yeah. I don't know. That was like one of the funniest moments because he literally just goes.
Yeah. Or how about that? How funny was that scene when she drops the gun and it goes down the stairs and just kills 18 guys?
So good. And they all just keep running in.
Yeah, they keep running in. Like how is and also like none of the bullets hit her.
Yeah.
They all like that's funny. That was good.
Mm-hmm.
What else can we talk about in this movie?
I don't know.
I know what you go.
There's a lot. I mean, like you said, how the James Bond reference. The first scene is literally just GoldenEye, first mission of GoldenEye.
Oh yeah,
such an iconic mission. Yeah, he's basically infiltrating. Like it's, if you go watch after this, go watch the first mission or play GoldenEye, the first mission. It's just the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
He sneaks into a party basically in the winter. It's cool.
Well, I guess that's in keeping with the concept of what if James Bond had a wife.
Mm-hmm. And the Harrier scene. There's
a
lot of the. I'm referencing a lot of the video games that I played from James Bond, and there's Harrier missions and everything. So
interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I guess there were Harrier missions in the Sean Connery movies.
What?
Because he was a hairy guy.
Ew.
Anyway, whatever. So, but also speaking of high five. So speaking of James Bond with the wife, Harry Tasker and his wife. I think again, like something like The Abyss, how that movie had to do with Cameron's romantic struggles. Mm-hmm. I think this also deals probably with his romantic struggles as well. But that The Abyss was about Gale Anne Hurd, right? But I think this movie represents his romantic struggles in a broader sense, where he's not talking about one single woman. He's just talking about the concept of general and total. His original mock-up for the poster was a grenade, and the pin. Like the circle pin was like a wedding ring. But in this you have Harry Tasker who, is super obsessed with his spy stuff. And then when he comes home, he can't tell. There's a disconnection he has with Helen because he comes home and the whole point of him talking to her is to bore her so that she doesn't suspect that he's a spy. Mm-hmm. Right? So they and then he's not listening to her when she talks because he's so bored by the home life because he's been doing all the spy stuff. So there's literally she talks about she said She goes, yeah, she said he'd do it for free if I slept with him. And he goes, that's great, Tony. I'll see you later. Shut up.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, he doesn't.
But I think that could sort of represent Cameron, going off and doing these movies and then coming home, not spending any time at home, just coming home and falling asleep immediately and not talking.
Mm-hmm.
And then, that kind of obsession that Harry has with his spy career can kind of represent or be a metaphor for Cameron in his movie career.
Yeah. His wife, whoever it is at the time, is just like, you're so boring. And he's like, I've been in water. I've been in a water tank for 5 hours filming
I just
a movie.
filmed The Abyss. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think at this point he wasn't with anybody, maybe, because I think Catherine Bigelow. It was Gale Ann Hurd from 86 to 89, and then Catherine Bigelow from like 91 to 93, maybe. And then Linda Hamilton, he married in 97, but he was with her for a while.
Yeah, they had a kid. Pretty sure, right?
Yeah, they had a kid in 92. So maybe no. So then he fell in love with Linda. I don't know why we're talking about this. He fell in love with Linda Hamilton while he was with Catherine Bigelow, I think, because he talked about having to tell her. Like, now he didn't say this specifically, but they were talking about Howard Stern. Like, it must suck to have to tell your wife that you love somebody else. He goes, "Oh, it's rock bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Sucks." So anyway, that concludes the Director Dossiers Gossip Hour.
Oh, I wanted to talk about this. This is another thing that took me out of the movie just a tad.
Mm-hmm.
There's scenes where the stuntman is clearly,
Oh yeah.
his face is just there.
You can just tell it's not Arnold.
Totally a different guy. Just takes you out completely.
It would have
He's
been
riding a horse, and then just the next scene is just some guy with. I really think. Well, actually, no. This wouldn't make sense because they wouldn't have noticed this until editing. But the skiing scene, there's a scene where it's clearly the stunt guy, and then it switches back to Arnold, and Arnold's hair is a little blonder or something, or maybe it was just the lighting.
Well, when they
me,
cut to the stunt guy, his hair is much more spiky. Like, it's not combed. Like,
yeah.
It's like sticking up. Like, he's electrocuted a little bit. You could tell it's a different guy.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been funny if they did like an Austin Powers thing, where in Austin Powers they have him do a stunt and then he lands and then they pan up and it's Tom Cruise. You know what I mean? And he just takes off. And he's like, "Yeah, baby." That would have been funny if they just did a shot where it was obviously just not Arnold at all.
Mm-hmm. Maybe they just left. Maybe they did that on purpose because.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know.
It's
But also, it's like the same thing with Arnold's dick, where the cinematographer Cameron's like to the cinematographer, like, "Are you sure you won't be able to see his face?" He's like, "Yeah," and then you can see his face.
Yeah.
Oh, did we talk about the cinematographer? The story. Okay, so Russell Carpenter was hired as a cinematographer on this movie, True Lies, and they were sitting in the watching dailies, and Cameron was sitting next to him, and Cameron was just so pissed over the shots that Russell Carpenter got. He goes, "I got in this or any universe, I got the biggest movie star on the planet, and I cannot see his face right now." He goes, "Where did you learn to read a light meter, dude?" And Russell Carpenter is just sinking into his seat going, "Oh my God, I am so fired." And then he called the previous cinematographer, I forget the guy's name, from The Abyss, the DP on that. And he goes, "Dude, I think I'm fired."
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, "Did he use the light meter line on you?" And he was like, "Okay, so he does that with everybody. I'm probably going to be fine."
Spider-Man.
Yeah, you don't know about that?
No. He had something to do with Spider-Man?
Oh, just you wait, pal.
Okay. Carolco Pictures bought the rights to a Spider-Man movie in 1990, and Cameron had written a script/treatment for Spider-Man in the 1990s that received a glowing endorsement from Stan Lee.
So the story goes that Cameron wanted to do Spider-Man before Titanic, or around around 1995 was when he wrote the treatment. He wrote like a scriptment is what he called it. So it was basically half of a script and half of a treatment. He kind of just did like a script 7.75 or something like that. And bless you, he just sneezed twice. So he wrote the script, and then there was some crazy rights disputes before he was doing Titanic, where there was the company that originally the company that Carolco bought it from was owned by another company. But then when the company that they bought the rights from Spider-Man from went bankrupt, that company was like, "No, we should have gotten actually the rights from that." But then there was another company who owned that company, who owned the company that owned that one. It's like this crazy shit that doesn't make any sense. And And then he did Titanic, and after he was on Howard Stern going like, I want to do Spider-Man. I'm ready to go. I got the script. Let's go. The script rules. Let's do it. And so the story for the Spider-Man was he was gonna have Leo, or he was talking to Leo about doing it, and it actually has a lot of similarities to the Sam Raimi Spider. So the organic web shooters, that was James Cameron's idea.
Oh wow!
Nobody had come up with that before. That was his idea. And there's a few other things. So the story goes that he gets bitten by the spider, and Electro is the main villain, Carlton Strand, and but the first thing he does, he doesn't like start fighting crime. He just basically tries to become like an icon, almost like he tries to become an influencer basically. He sells his appearance at parties and stuff like that, and does like photo shoots. And then Carlton Strand goes, "Hey, you're just like us. You have powers. Join our team." Or no, what happens is the Sandman basically, the Sandman's name is Boyd. And the Sandman comes and beats the shit out of Spider-Man and then leaves. And then Carlton Strand's like, "Hey, that was a test. Join our team, bro." And he's like, "Nah, I'm all right." And then they start to get in a fight. And then it ends with the Twin Towers. They're on top of the Twin Towers, and he's fighting Sandman and Electro. And he throws Sandman in front of Electro's shock things, electricity, and it turns Sandman into glass, which is a very good idea.
Oh,
and
cool.
then Spider-Man beats Electro by slamming him into the side of the Twin Towers, which doesn't age well.
Oh,
would not have aged well.
No.
And Carl Strand's like, "You're just a kid." Then he dies. And then also there's a weird like bondage sex thing that he does with MJ, where he like spins her up in web and like has sex with her.
Oh my gosh.
And all of her, like, she has some problems about like at home, and I don't know if that's true. That might be somewhat true.
Mm-hmm.
And she has problems at home, like she's abused at home and stuff like that. And she comes from like a shitty household. And then she has sex with him, and then she's just fine for the rest of the movie. She's like, "Oop, da doop, ba doo." That's kind of like a weird thing.
Problems.
But yeah, we don't know what stage that script was in. We don't know if that was the finished script. That was just sort of what it was at the time. Apparently, Arnold was going to be in it at one point, and it would have been very interesting. But then, eventually, the rights. Somebody sued for the rights, and Carolco could have won. James Cameron was like, they saved. They didn't pay. All they needed to do was pay $250,000 for legal fees, and they could have had a $2 billion franchise on their hands.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, Carolco was like, "No, we're done, whatever." And James Cameron never got to direct the movie.
Dang.
Yeah, and then Michael Jackson almost became Spider-Man.
What?
I think Michael Jackson almost bought Marvel because Marvel was bankrupt, and he almost bought them because he wanted to play Spider-Man.
Wow.
Oh my God, can you imagine?
That would have been nuts. Titanic, 1997. After True Lies, director Guillermo del Toro recalls Cameron telling him that his next movie would be a smaller, intimate love story. Months later, Cameron told del Toro, "I wrote my love story. It takes place on the Titanic."
Yeah, and he heard that, and he was just, "Oh, there goes your small love story." Mm-hmm. So this originally came out, and it was in the early 90s. Actually, it was discovered by, I think, Rob Ballard. The Titanic wreck was discovered in 1985 by Rob Ballard. And at that point, Cameron was already interested in, obviously, undersea shit. And in the early 90s, he started taking notes about, like, "Oh, maybe I should make a movie about the Titanic or whatever." And he started taking notes on it. And the next day, he got this black letter, and it was an invitation to the Titanica, which was the IMAX footage of the wreck, which was a giant coincidence, because he's like, "Whoa, I was just writing down notes on this." And then he went and started, and that's where his obsession with the Titanic grew. And then he had to convince the studio because he at this point he wanted to make the movie, but he also wanted to go see the Titanic. But the only way he could see the Titanic is if he got somebody to fund it.
Yeah.
So he told the studio, like, "Look, if you give me $4 million, I will go down there and we'll film the footage that we'll put in the movie, and that can be the marketing ploy. Like, you can actually see the footage of that Titanic when you go to see Titanic."
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, "All right, sure." So they gave him $4 million, and so Mir 1 and Mir 2, they were Russian submersibles, and Mir is the Russian word for peace, and they were these Russian submersibles that he went to Russia and talked to the guys and made a deal to use the submersibles for the movie. And there's a story about like the night he made the agreement with them. They toasted and had a few drinks of vodka, and the Russian guys, are just slamming it back, just like it was water. And then Cameron he was like, "I'm gonna die. I might die. This is the worst I've ever felt in my life." And then the Russian guy's like, "Hey, you can use the things," and he was like, "Oh, thank God, yes." And so that was pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm. You know, this is also a little fun fact. The guy who found the wreck, he was in charge of a mission to find nuclear submarines that they had lost, sort of like the Abyss. Yeah. And he just did it so quick that he had like 14 or 15 extra days on his mission.
It might have been 12.
Yeah, and then he ended up finding the Titanic.
Yeah, he was on a secret
kind of
Navy.
Funny how that's like a crazy coincidence.
That's kind of like a James Cameron-esque thing to do, I guess. Just be like, well, I got 12 more days with it. I might as well get my money.
Yeah, I might as well go look for something else cool. It's funny. This is goes back to when I was saying in his early life how a lot of what he's interested in bleeds into what he wants to do in his movies. Because he really, I mean, the essence of him wanting to do the Titanic is the fact that he wanted to go see the Titanic.
Exactly.
Which is just nuts. So he wrote one of the best movies ever.
Yeah.
And directed it just based off the first fact that he wanted to go just see it.
Oh, wait till you hear about the amount of money they gave him to do an Avatar demo. We'll get to that. What's the next thing we got on there?
Production took place in Mexico, where Cruz had 100 days to build a 40-acre facility with 5 sound stages, the world's largest outdoor filming tank, the world's largest indoor filming tank, and the world's tallest sound stage.
So they dropped a lot of money. That set cost so much money that they just made it a studio. So it was like Fox Studios Beja in Mexico. So that they just used that because we put so much money into this. Might as well just use the place. And there was a lot of deliberation of how they would film the Titanic. At first, they were thinking about going to Poland and rebuilding a full boat for $10 million. Like, you could just build a Titanic for $10 million.
Yeah.
Like a full working one. And then he goes, well, how many times do we get to sink it? And they go, once. So I got one take of it sinking. Shit. So we have to build a thing. So they had to build like just pieces of it. They built basically almost a 1-to-1 scale model of one side of it. And then whenever they needed to film the other side of it, they just reversed the image. So like let's say they wanted a shot. Let's say they built the left side, right? And then they wanted a shot of the right side. What they would do is film the left side, but then put all the writing and stuff backwards, and then they'd flip it so it would look like the right side of the ship. You know what I mean?
And that must have been hard to keep track of.
Yeah, I can't. That's some crazy math to do. I can't even. It's like simple math, really, and I can't really even do that. But the production. But so they originally, Cameron was like, all right, it's going to cost. I think the original number was it was going to cost $80 million, or maybe even $100, and then it ended up just ballooning. And this was notoriously like maybe might have been even worse than the Abyss shoot, because the budget kept going up, and this was the first $200 million movie.
Yeah.
So, and there's a story in that book, the opening of that book in front of Titanic and the making of James Cameron, where they're about to film the boat sinking, like the hardest thing to shoot. And that night, Cameron is just eating some shitty lunch in his super cramped, crappy trailer. And this guy, Bill Mechanic, who was like the head of the studio at that point, came and had to talk to him. Like, look, we're really concerned. We've seen clips in the movie. It's very, very good. We want the movie to succeed, but here's a list of scenes that you have to cut out. And Cameron basically was just like, fuck you, shut up, go. You're going to have to fire me, and you're not going to fire me.
Yeah. You've already given me so much money.
He goes, you can't fire me. I'm the only person who can pull this off. So it's either take a $100 million bath or get the hell off my set type of thing, you know? And they were like, shit. So he went off and filmed the scene. And do you know about the chowder incident? You'll just guess what it is. You'll never get it.
I'm guessing. My guess would be that somebody said something to him and he just dumped chowder on them. I don't know.
Okay, no, it's way worse.
Yeah.
So there was one. I think it was the last. It might have been the last day of shooting, or one of the last days they were shooting some part of the movie, and the caterer made clam chowder for everybody. And after they ate, they went back to go film, and all of a sudden, this one lady's eyes rolled back into her head. And she fainted, and Cameron went over to go help her, and he realized that he felt really, really weird. So he's like, "Oh my god, maybe I got poisoning from the clam, the muscle it was muscle chatter. He goes, maybe I got poisoning." So he went in the bathroom and just tried to start throwing up, and he said he couldn't, but his eyes were just super bloodshot from trying to throw up for like however many minutes. And he went back out onto the set, and there was nobody there. He's like, "Where is everybody?" And when he found everybody, there was about 90% of the set was contaminated by whatever this chowder was, and 10% of the set was it was the good crew and the bad crew, whoever was like sober and whoever was under the influence or whatever the hell was going on. And they all go to the hospital. Just vans and vans of people going to the hospital, and they get there, and it's crazy. Just people running around freaking out, and the assistant director, I forget her name, whatever, Christy, whatever, I don't know. Cameron's on a cot in a hospital room, and he's just like, whoa. And then he sees her, and he goes, "Hey, Karen, what's your 20?" And she's like right across the room, and she picks up her thing and looks at him and goes, "Oh, I'm just giving the doctor the names to all the crew so that we know we can account." And he goes, "Hey, you're talking to me from the walkie-talkie. You're just as messed up as I am right now." And then she took her pen and stabbed him in the face, and started freaking out. And the doctors had to drag her away. And then he started laughing because he was still messed up.
They were like really.
So he's
tripping.
like, "Oh!" So he's laughing, getting stabbed in the face. And then Bill Paxton, who also got contaminated, was like, "Jim, this is crazy, man. Like, I gotta get out of here." So he went and just went back to his trailer and just started pounding beers and like put himself to sleep, and then woke up the next morning fine. And while everybody at the hospital had to start drinking charcoal so that it would absorb whatever was in their stomach. And then it found out that the next morning the toxicology report said that somebody put like something like 40 pounds of PCP in the chowder.
Oh my lord!
I did not know
PCP.
PCP. And there was a little girl on the set who got contaminated by this stuff, which is insane.
Yeah.
They never found out who did it. Some people think it was somebody who, James Cameron fired somebody a couple days before, so they think maybe it was somebody who had beef with the caterer and was trying to get them fired. They never found who did it.
That's terrifying.
Crazy.
PCP.
Yeah, that's a life. You know how crazy it is to get taking something like LSD or PCP willingly is one thing, but especially unwittingly, it really, really messes you up. It's a crazy experience that people really can't recover from.
Yeah. I mean, any kind of PCP, it wouldn't really be considered a psychedelic, but anything like that. I mean, that woman stabbed him in the face.
Yeah, and she worked on his
next him in the eye and killed him.
She worked on his next movie.
I know. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't her fault, but that is nuts. I did not know anything about that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either until recently, until like a year or two ago.
The production on Titanic went behind schedule and $80 million over budget, and was reported in the media as a disaster in the making.
Yeah, so that was Cameron was getting, because this was also, he was the action movie guy. He's like, "Hey, I want to make Titanic." People were like, "What? You shut up. You're an idiot." And he talked about how Arnold had a heart surgery type thing, and he was in the hospital like, hey, James, like, don't worry about what they're saying out there. He's like, "Dude, I should be calling you. You're in the hospital." He starts talking about how that was like a nice anecdote about how thoughtful Arnold was, I guess.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of pressure on Cameron. Because somebody goes, "You see go to New York. You see one of those skyscrapers?" He goes, "That's $200 million right there." He goes, "Now put that building and put it on your head." That's what James Cameron had to do during the production of the movie, and that's a really visceral way to put it,
And just the technicality of everything. I mean, even the pressure of having to get the sinking right. There's a lot of pressure in that because there's a lot of theories about how it happened, and that's pretty much the biggest thing about the Titanic is that it sunk. So if he gets that part wrong, which in that documentary where he's talking, they're basically trying to recreate the sinking that happened because he had all these theories about how it happened. So they built a miniature and ran through a million different tests to try to recreate how it looked in the movie.
There was there's a National Geographic documentary you can watch on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
It's like Titanic 20 years later.
Mm-hmm. But either way, it's still a lot of pressure in terms of
And also just the safety of doing that stunt, because they had a lot of people that had to slide down.
Yeah.
The shots of everybody sliding down, no cameraman wanted to do that. So Cameron was sliding down with the handheld camera. And that was him on the camera, you know? People, like, you talked about, like, you told me, like, extras almost drowned and shit like that. Like,
yeah,
Kate Winslet almost drowned.
They didn't know. I guess they weren't aware of how the stairs would be lifted up when the water rushed in, because the wood was buoyant. So the water rushed in, and it ripped the stairs off of the ground.
Oh, shit.
And I'm pretty sure that's when that happened, is when the two extras got, like, crunched in between as the water was rushing by, and they both two extras almost just drowned because they were stuck. From the wood was like crushing them and drowning them.
Yeah, and you have all that force of water being poured in. That's crazy.
On December 19th, 1997, Titanic opened to great reviews and grossed $1.8 billion off a $200 million budget. It received an A+ on CinemaScore. It was nominated for 14 Oscars and won 11, including 3 for Cameron for editing, directing, and Best Picture.
Yeah, so that was the tip of the top. I think it was around this time Quentin Tarantino told a joke on the Howard Stern show. I think it was around this time. It might have been after Avatar 2, where a filmmaker dies and goes to heaven, and the first thing he sees is James Cameron on a big crane getting a shot, and he goes, wait a minute, James Cameron's not dead. And St. Peter goes, no, that's God. He just thinks he's James Cameron. So for this movie, this is one of the best movies I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to watch it again because I rewatch all the movies before each podcast. I didn't because I can't.
You can't deal with it.
Dude, I cry for like the last hour of the movie every time. It's so draining. I'm like, I can't do it this time. But I did write down some notes, and I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to read off of the notes a little bit.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, Cameron said that Titanic can be seen as a microcosm of the apocalypse. He still has that. He still has that thread line of apocalyptic themes in his movie with Titanic. Although it's a lot more broad than just, you know, nuclear Armageddon or climate change or something like that you would see in Avatar. He said, one can say that the Titanic is the world where gender and class division occur on the upper and lower levels of the deck, while men work hard down in the boiler room to keep the whole thing going. You know, like so. But you imagine the Titanic as Earth, per se, basically, right? So, if this was a post Cold War world now, so he took a step away from the Cold War and True Lies, which we discussed, and Titanic represents him taking that step away further to a more broad, you know, depiction of the world today. And he couldn't really find the new threat he was looking for in True Lies. And according to Cameron, the world will not end in a climactic instant or any particular dramatic way, like something like, you know, a nuclear war or whatever. He said when it does, it'll be because of a banality or a lapse in concentration on the part of humanity, and it'll occur slowly. It won't be an instant. It'll just be this slow inevitable thing.
Mm-hmm.
And just like, you know, those on the Titanic are stuck on a boat in the middle of the ocean, you know, humanity is going to be stuck on Earth in the middle of an ocean of stars, let's say, right?
Mm-hmm.
Give me a high five for that one.
That was awesome, dude. Hell
All right,
yeah.
this is a little rocky so far, but I'll get the hang of it. The whole premise of a Titanic movie is somewhat the ultimate form of life and death drama. There is a particular sense of tragedy in how the fate of human life isn't contained inside of a finite moment, like somebody shooting a gun or something like that. It's that slow burning hour that it takes the ship to sink that is really just wrings out everything that it can from you, and it's the way people aboard the ship are completely powerless to stop what's going on. We see these characters who we perceive these characters in the first half of the movie, right? And then the genius thing that it does is all these characters like I'm a good guy, I'm a nice rich man, and I'm a bad poor man, blah blah blah. And then, but then in the last hour, we really see these people for who they are, because in life in that situations, that's who you are.
Yeah.
You know. So we see some guys act cowardly, we see some guys act heroically. I also think Titanic represents James Cameron
operating on a very thin overlap of a singular creative integrity and mass market appeal, more so than any other movie he's made so far. On the Howard Stern show, when Titanic was coming out, Robin, the lady on that show, told Cameron that he's used to making these big, entertaining movies, but the Titanic is a serious film. Cameron responds by saying something along the lines of, "It can be both. Why does it have to be one or the other?" And Titanic is a movie that is both very difficult to pull off and the kind that I tend to admire most. It is intellectually stimulating, it is emotionally stimulating, and it's entertaining to a mass audience. Primarily intellectually driven movies tend not to be popular at the box office. Popcorn movies tend to make a lot of money, but they can feel hollow under the thematic hood. And these are the extremes of both ideas, right? I'm not saying one is holistically one or the other, but usually it's a spectrum that things exist on. The Cameron's movies like Aliens and Terminator 2 have a very blue-collar feel where they use miniatures and stuff like that, and other visual effects, renders making movies the engineering problem, like I said earlier. Whereas the more Oscar-baiting movies can be seen as emotional, intellectual, and I think Titanic represents a perfect balance of that binary. Sure, it's a 3-hour costume period love story about gender and class politics, which is typically associated with the Oscars, but it's also about this giant effects-driven, thrilling disaster movie, So that's kind of my gist on it. I think I never thought of it I heard Cameron talk about it as it's a microcosm for the world ending, and I never thought about it in that context. And that was really interesting to me because all those metaphors and those allegories kind of hold up very, very well. And also that's a very global. His movies have a lot of global resonance because they're very visually oriented, and they're usually about things that the whole world. There's nothing particularly American about his movies. It's a very encompassing worldview that he has in these movies. And the Titanic might be the most dramatic situation of all time narratively for a movie.
And the Titanic was something that everyone in the world turned their head and was like, "Wait, this unsinkable ship sunk." Yeah. Which is just, I'm surprised that was there other Titanic movies before this?
There was one. There was A Night to Remember was a book, but there was another Titanic movie in '52, and that was when he rewatched that movie on a whim before he came up with the idea for it. He rewatched the movie on a whim, and then that's when he started writing down notes, and that's when he got that note in the mail saying, "Hey, come watch the movie." He's like, "Whoa."
Mm-hmm. It just seems like something that would have been a story that would have been told more than once or twice before.
Yeah,
that.
right.
You know what I'm saying?
It was only once. I don't think they even showed it sinking in the original.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure. I don't know.
I mean, it's just a huge undertaking to do.
Yeah. Have you seen the Titanic?
Yeah.
What did you think about it?
I loved it.
Yeah.
Have I seen the Titanic?
I don't know. Well, because I watched it a few years ago, and that was sort of the first time I watched it because I only watched bits and pieces of it because my older siblings were watching it for a long time. I never sat down. My only exposure to Titanic was I would always laugh when the guy hit the propeller and does the cartwheel down to the water. I would always cry laughing. But then this time, I still kind of laugh because for old time's sake, I laughed.
Yeah.
But then that.
But then you're actually crying this time.
Yeah. Dude, watching the husband and wife cuddle in the bed and just wait their death. Watching the mom tuck her kids in. I remember watching that when I was little. I was like, hey, I'm a kid. And that's crazy.
I'm a kid and that's
I'm a kid and I'm still admitting that that's crazy.
Yeah, that story of the two older couple that the lady stays with him. Yeah. That's just heartbreaking, but also really sweet at the same time. I like how there's the accounts of real people tied into that, and it's nice of James Cameron to go back with that one documentary and admit that he got some of it wrong.
What about the guy with the gun you were telling me about?
So in this documentary, he admits that he got this one guy wrong.
The 20 Years Later documentary.
Yeah, the 20 Years Later documentary. He admits that this character, he just took some liberties as a writer with him, and then he realized after that he shouldn't have because the guy's William Murdoch. He's co-captain or something, and in the movie he shoots someone and then shoots himself out of guilt, basically. And there's no real life account that actually happened.
Yeah, so that was just the screenwriter and Cameron.
Mm-hmm, but he goes back and says he wishes he just made that the character he likes that that happens in the movie, but he wishes he had attached that to a character who was just some random character and not a real person. Because the family reached out and was like, that's so disrespectful. I mean, you know, my grandfather went down with the ship.
Yeah.
And he was probably helping people. You know what I'm saying? And to kind of... So he admits to being wrong about that and sort of almost regretting it and wishing he had just attached that to a different character.
Because you told me that over the phone, and I thought you meant the guy Cal. I went Cal, and you were like, yeah. And I thought it was the guy. I thought it was Billy Zane's character with the gun. I'm like, that was a real guy that they told that they said just killed himself like at the end. I'm like, that.
But fun fact, I went to the port where Titanic last left from.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And the on the whatchamacallit, this is just totally random, but throughout the tour they give you a name, and then at the end of the tour you see like what happened to your character that you are, to the person you are. Guess what my character did?
You I don't know what.
Dressed like a woman.
No,
and
I was gonna say something.
onto the ship.
Damn, dude, you're a piece of shit.
I know.
And not because he dressed as a woman.
Yeah. No. Because I snuck on.
Anything goes these days. I fully support that.
Yeah, but my character did that.
That's crazy. You're a coward and a son of a bitch.
I know. I
I
was like, what the hell? Of course.
That's like the thing we talked about. Like the most dramatic stuff is the individual stories of people either acting coward. But there was also like a great dilemma that they were talking about was Molly Brown, who's what's the lady's name? Kathy Bates.
Yeah.
Her character. When they're on the boat and she's arguing with the guy, like, we have to go back, and he's like, if we go back there, they're gonna tug on the boat, and we're all gonna die. Mm-hmm. Right? It's actually a good dilemma. Mm-hmm. Because do I save these people on this boat, or should I go back try to save more at the risk of killing everybody, right? And when they were also talking about, there was one guy on the boats who he shuffled people around from all the boats to where he was able to get a full boat that was empty. So he put like one person on this boat, one person on this boat until the whole boat was empty, and then he went back, and that was the boat that went back to get Rose. Mm-hmm. But he said he only saved like 3 people. He didn't really. It was too late because a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. But that story, the first one that you mentioned, is a real one too. That actually happened.
What that was real. Yeah,
because the guy whose boat it was talks. He's like interviewed later in life, and he's like, of all the boats I got put on with her.
Yeah.
And now I'm the bad guy forever.
Yeah.
I mean,
I do think the movie kind of, but I don't think the movie makes judgments about a lot of stuff. Like that.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of like, this is what happened. What would you make it?
I guess that's from my perspective. I view him as the bad guy.
Oh, okay, because you would have done her everything. Well, ow!
I would have saved everybody. I wouldn't.
My chair just crushed my foot. But that's another thing that Cameron talks about, is because it's a movie that makes you go, what would I have done in that situation? Would I have been a coward? Would I have been a hero? And I guess that's one of the things that makes it stick in your brain for a long time. And also just the romance of Jack and Rose is so well done. Mm-hmm. So have you ever heard of the deleted ending that they had for this?
No.
So the original ending that we all love and know is that she just throws the shit into the water, right? And it's great. She throws the ruby into the whatever it is. But there's a deleted ending where all the people on the boat and Bill Paxton all see what she's doing, and they're like, "Don't do it!" And then she's like, "It's all about loving and in life when you love," and it's like, whoa. And people were like, "This is terrible." It's like, yeah, that's why it's a deleted scene.
Yeah.
It didn't work, you know.
Mm-hmm. So she just went on a whole rant about.
Yeah, and they were like, "All right, throw it in."
Yeah.
Something.
Oh, they agreed. Like,
it was
you
something.
Should do it.
Yeah.
Damn.
But yeah, great movie.
Documentaries and TV. After Titanic, many projects were floated by Cameron that never came to fruition, including Planet of the Apes remake, Terminator 3, True Lies 2, and another pass at Spider-Man.
Planet of the Apes, I think that was a good move to pass on that. Otherwise, he'd be directing Abraham Lincoln at the end of that movie. Do you know how that movie ends, the Mark Wahlberg one?
No.
He goes back. Because the whole thing is that he goes to the future, and then where the apes are, and then he gets back in his plane and goes back in time, and he goes back in time, and he goes to the Lincoln Memorial, and it's a giant ape, Abraham Lincoln. I think that might be his name. And he's like, "Oh no!" So and then Terminator 3 they offered him, and he's like, I kind of know how to do this. I don't know if I should do it again. And then he told he's like, I don't want to. And Arnold was like, I'm not going to do it unless James Cameron's doing it. And then James was like, how much money are they offering you? And he's like, 20 million, something like that. And he goes, yeah, you should sell out and just do the movie. Yeah. So James Cameron told him to do the movie. Spider-Man 2. We mentioned True Lies. Sequel 9/11 happened. Sequel, not going to do that. Spider-Man, we mentioned how that stopped because he wanted to do it after Titanic, but it just never came to fruition.
All right. In 1998, Cameron left the visual effects company he created, Digital Domain, who had just won the Oscar for best visual effects on Titanic.
Yeah. So because his plan was to have the company so that whenever he wanted to do something, he could say, "Hey, get working on this, so we can make this movie." But he was also the CEO. But his responsibilities as a director and as a CEO were kind of conflicting interests because since he owned that company, they were already working on a discounted rate on Titanic to save money. So they were already struggling, and now he was like, "Well, I'm not sure if I want to make a movie just yet," and which he didn't for 10 years, 12 years. So they were like, "Well, if you're not going to be making movies, like what the hell is going on? We need to make a change." So they had a heated board panel meeting, and he just let. He was like, "Look, I can't do this. I'm leaving." And then he left, and then Stan Winston, who was the visual effects guy he started it with. Stan Winston's legendary. He won the Oscar for best visual effects, I think, for Alien, or best practical art, like makeup or something like that. And he stood up and said, "I'm with James. He's my best bud. I'm gonna get the hell out of here." And then he's basically, in solidarity with him, left the company as well.
So basically, the two main guys left.
They got Spider-Man. They got Norman Osborn. You know how much I sacrificed? I started this company. Yeah, they did that.
And then there's the Guillermo del Toro story.
Oh yeah. So after Guillermo del Toro was like solidified as an American director, I think he's from Mexico. So people in Mexico were like, "Oh, he's a big American director now. He should be rich. So let's kidnap his dad."
Oh, I did hear about this.
They kidnapped his dad, and they were asking. Let's say the ransom was like $5 million. Oh, we didn't talk about that on Titanic. James Cameron gave his money back during the production. He got. Let's say he got $5 million to make the movie. I don't know if it was that much. He gave the money back and was like, "I don't want you to think I misled you." And then he gave back his share of the box office as well. But there's conflicting interest. On the Howard Stern show, he said he didn't. He gave it back. So he's not going to make money off the movie. But in that book, Next to You, The Futurist, they described that he was talking to the studio head, and he goes, I'll give back my share of the box office. And the guy goes, "Shut up. That doesn't mean anything." So Cameron was like, "All right, screw you. I'm going to take it then." And then that's how he got rich. I don't know which one's true. But obviously Cameron had some money, and his dad got kidnapped, and Guillermo was like, "Hey, I need help. I don't know what I'm going to do." And James Cameron was like, "Well," and I think Guillermo was like, "Hey, can you help me? What do I do? What do I tell these people?" And then James Cameron was like, "No, I'll just pay the ransom. It's fine."
Dang. All right. Cameron was encouraged by those around him to try his hand in TV. He had developed a story originally titled Experimental Girl, which eventually became Dark Angel.
So he casted Jessica Alba in that role, and that was sort of like her first breakout role. And that premiere, that was the first and only experience with network TV or episodic TV. And the premiere was like, it got like 17 million views, and all the episodes are doing very, very well. It's a very successful show. And then they did another season, but the second season, they just put it in like a graveyard slot for some reason. I forget why. I don't even know if I ever read why. But and then after that, its views kind of dwindled, but it was still doing very good. And then they replaced it with some other show that didn't get nearly as many views. So even in TV, he was still highly successful. And
he was directing in that?
He directed one episode in the second season, but he created that.
I always forget that's how some TV shows work. It's a different director every episode.
Yeah, it's usually, like in TV, the writer is sort of the main guy. Or the creator, the showrunner is the main guy, and then in movies, it's the director who has the final say. What's next?
After the Titanic expeditions, Cameron embarked on a similar project on the wreck and sinking of the German battleship Bismarck.
So I watched this today. This was pretty cool. It's Lance Hendrickson. You would love this because it's
I bet.
basically that Titanic documentary you watched, except with the Bismarck in World War II, and it talks about how the Bismarck sank the hood, and then the British Army sent 2 ships to go attack the Bismarck, and they were just trying to figure out how it fell, and they did. And the big controversy, it was like a forensic research thing of like, okay, did the British sink the Bismarck or did the Germans sink it
On purpose.
deliberately? And apparently they think it was the Germans that did it. Deliberately, so it wasn't the British that shot it out, but they were hammering this thing. Lance Hendrickson narrated it, and it's almost like Dan Carlin doing a documentary because Lance Hendrickson has this. He was what's his name? He was Bishop in Aliens,
Oh, okay.
the robot guy, and he narrates it, and the whole thing is like the artillery shells. They've shot over 2,400 artillery shells over the course of an hour and a half, and stuff like that. There's this shell is 50 inches and weighs over a ton and flies through the air at 7,000 miles an hour, like whatever. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and but it's like a dad's dream, dude. It's such a fascinating documentary. They got the soldiers on both sides to come and be like, "Hey, we're friends now. Don't worry, we're not Nazis anymore." And that was really good. You would like that one. You can find that on YouTube.
Yeah, I'll watch that. Shout out Dan Carlin, Hardcore History. You're the man, Dan. Okay.
Oh my god.
The last documentary he would direct would be Aliens of the Deep.
Oh, you skipped one.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you did.
Oh, I did. In 2001, Cameron put together an expedition with Bill Paxton to further explore and research the wreck of the Titanic, which was chronicled in the documentary Ghost of the Abyss.
So Bill Paxton is Hudson. Why don't you put her in charge? And then he was also the guy in True, the car dealership guy in True Lies.
Oh,
and then he was, I can't believe we didn't talk about that. And then he was also the modern day pirate guy in Titanic. And there's there's a funny scene in that where they're going down to the Titanic, and Bill Paxton is in one of the submersibles with this Russian guy, and James Cameron's in the other one. And Bill Paxton's going down, and he's like all nervous and stuff because he hasn't done it before. And he goes to the Russian guy. He goes, "What's this? The oxygen?" He goes, "What number is it?" He goes, "Oxygen, oxygen." He goes, "All right, so if what number does that dip down below until we're in trouble?" And he's like, "No, oxygen, good." He's like, "Yeah, I know, but what number?" He's like, "Yeah, it's good." And the guy barely speaks English. He's like, "Shit."
He has no idea.
Yeah. That's a really fascinating because they talk about they try to find they find like hairbrushes and shoes and stuff like that. It's very interesting. They find windows that are still intact, and they talk about some of the stories. But there's a crazy there's a good not crazy, but there's a good sequence where they have these two little ROVs, Jake and Elmore, which his brother Mike Cameron made because his brother is like a genius engineer, and each of them cost $1 million each, and they're the little guys that go in that are connected with the fiber optic cable, and they can go into the Titanic and go through the halls, and one of them got stuck. Elmore got stuck, and they're like, "Shit, it's stuck. I don't know what we're gonna do." So they go back up, and they go, "We can't. It's $1 million piece of equipment. We have to go back down and get it." So they put like a fish hook on the other robot, Jake, and they go into the mesh of like one of the components of the outside of the thing, and they grab it and they bring it out, and they finally get it, and it's really hard, and they get out, and they're like, "Yeah, we got them! Like we don't lose the thing anymore." And then you see the guy go, "It is 6/16, September 11th, 2001, and we're coming back up." And you go, "Oh shit!" And then they come back up. Bill Paxton, James Cameron walks out of the thing. And Bill Paxton's like, "Jim, it's the biggest terrorist attack in history," and you get to see them learn about 9/11 in real time.
That's nuts.
I'm getting chills just saying it. It was the hearing that guy say the date, and you go, "Oh." Crazy.
Like, those guys got no idea what's coming.
Yeah, and they talked about like for a day we were just like we can't like we don't should we continue?
Yeah.
And they were like it was a very somber thing, and then we just realized like we just decided just do the last 3 days of the expedition. That was one of the craziest moments in that. Yeah,
that's crazy because if you think about it, it's like they're by one tragedy and then they learn about another.
They talk about that where they're exploring the tragedy of the 20th century and they come up and learn about the biggest tragedy of the 21st century. I don't know if the biggest, but like the an iconic or cultural moment.
Yeah,
a cornerstone.
That sort of reminds me of the the 20 years later documentary where the guy is talking about when they finally find the Titanic on the first expedition. Yeah. And they're all cheering. They're all like, yes, yes, yes. And then the lady goes, she sunk in 20 minutes or whatever. No, or whatever. She fell to the bottom in 20 minutes. And then the guy was like, oh, yeah. We're kind of like celebrating on these people's graves right now. Like, I'm sure once they learned about 9/11, and then they probably were sitting in it, and it probably just I could imagine it just made the whole experience a little
somber.
Yeah. Brought down the mood just a tad bit.
Yeah.
It's kind of like it's bringing down the mood right now. The last documentary he would direct would be Aliens of the Deep, which chronicled Cameron and a team of scientists studying the life that exists in the deepest depths of the ocean.
It's funny. I've seen this a couple times, and I was watching it in the living room a couple days ago, and my sister Julia came home from school, and I was just watching it, and I'm like, look at this animal. There's a crazy sequence where they go down, because they're going down to see what the hell's going on down at the ocean floor, and they find this one animal. That's probably the only really crazy moment in the movie, where they find this crazy animal, and it's, imagine take like a net, and then make sure, and the net is shaped like an oval or an O, like it connects like a piece of SpaghettiOs or something like that, and it's this weird floaty thing, and it has this glowing mesh inside of it, like this architecture inside of it. And it looks, and there's just this one clump on it that looks like it has a brain, and the rest of it's just this floating fabric. You're like, whoa. Mm-hmm. What? They're like, what the hell is that? And that's a crazy moment. But then there's a lady on it, the main lady scientist, who's, it's a little awkward because sometimes you could tell the conversations are a little bit like stilted because they have to talk in front of a camera. So this one guy comes out, and she's like, so how did you like it? He's like, yeah, it's incredible. And she goes, yeah, life, it's incredible. And like there's this weird there's this weird thing, and then she also they'll be down there and James Cameron be like, whoa, look at that thing, that's crazy, because he's used to having a camera on him. Mm-hmm. And she's just like, wow, holy pancakes, Batman. She said that, and me and Julia just went and looked at each other in the eye. I went, whoa, bro, what did she say? Mm-hmm. No, I'm sure she's a nice lady, and I like the documentary. She's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't find that one or...
That's on Disney Plus.
Yeah, I know. I was looking for it, but I told
you. Just type in Aliens of the Deep.
I did.
Bullshit.
I did.
That's not true. Ghost of the Abyss isn't on Disney Plus anymore, but that is.
All right, comment below if it's still on Disney Plus. Go subscribe to Disney Plus and let us know.
And if you're already subscribed to Disney Plus, just give us $8 a month. Yeah. All right, what's next?
Avatar, 2009. After seeing Lord of the Rings in 2001, Cameron knew the technology existed to make Avatar. And in 2005, 20th Century Fox allocated a budget of $10 million for a proof of concept demo for the motion capture technology.
So we mentioned that he got $4 million for Titanic, which is already a giant amount of money, but $10 million is basically a movie.
Yeah.
Some movies cost that much. They're like, go make a 2-minute demo. So... you mentioned Lord of the Rings. He saw Gollum in Lord of the Rings and was like, all right, nice. So that exists, but I have to do this with hundreds of characters, basically. And 60% of the movie has to be just that. So how am I going to do that? And so he didn't go back to Digital Domain because he's like, screw those guys. So he worked with Weta, who did Lord of the Rings. That's Peter Jackson's company. And they still do the Avatar movies. And I think ILM did a little bit of stuff, too, with it. And it was Project 880. And it was basically the $10 million they got from that went into that and getting this scene that he had from the scriptment that he wrote in 1995. And they had an actor who didn't play Neytiri and an actor who didn't end up playing Jake. They had them stand in front of the thing with all the technology on them, and they made this demo. And you can actually watch it on YouTube. And you'd expect it to look terrible. The faces look a little bit weird, but overall it looks pretty good for 2005. Especially it's only like a 37-second thing. Mm-hmm. After the studio saw that, they were like, "All right, nice." And the idea for Avatar, he wrote the scriptment in 1995, and then put it away for 10 years, and then read it again. It was like nice, but originally all the stuff with the bioluminescence in the forest and all the Avatar ideas, a lot of that came from just like the stuff he would draw when he was little, and a lot of the sci-fi stuff. He said the seed for Avatar was always kind of there, And so yeah, that was pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then and also like you think $10 million, 37 seconds, wouldn't that translate to like $1 billion for a feature-length movie? But he said like a lot of that $10 million just went through getting the infrastructure of how the system works. Once we actually get the hang of it, it will cost we can get that cost down.
Mm-hmm. And for $10 million, I mean,
Yeah,
like should have it down. I feel like, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't
well,
know what it goes
basically
into
his proposal was, all right, you can give me $10 million now, and if it doesn't work, then you're out $10 million. Or you can just give me $200 million now, and then if it doesn't work, you just spent $200 million.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, all right, fine, we'll give you $10 million.
Mm-hmm. All right. During casting, Jake Gyllenhaal and Matt Damon passed on the role of Jake Sully. Nuts, idiots.
Well, I don't like. I mean, I don't know why they would pass. I mean, unless it was like a scheduling thing. Jake Gyllenhaal, him passing is at that point is kind of insane to me.
Mm-hmm.
And Matt Damon has famously talked about how James Cameron offered him a percentage of the gross. So if he did Avatar, he would have made $250 million because he would have had a percentage. So he's like, well, shit,
Now he's a crypto guy.
Yeah, exactly. Now he's crypto and Dunkin' Donuts guy. But I like Matt Damon.
No,
so,
I love Matt Damon.
But he ended up finding Sam Worthington, and he was like, I like this guy because he said the movie didn't need a star anyway. And then he cast Zoe Saldana, and he cast Sam Worthington, these two unknowns, and they were really good together.
Production went fairly smoothly for a James Cameron movie.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier, how there's crazy, I can tell you crazy production stories from each and every James Cameron movie, but there's really none. Like, the worst I heard is that somebody's phone went off, and he nailed the phone to the wall.
Damn.
And that's it. That's like the only story I heard of him being like kind of crazy on it, or the production running into some there was other than that, it seems to have gone fairly smoothly.
And it's all like the face. Do you have any sense of how the facial capture stuff works?
I thought I knew, like I got the motion capture and stuff, but what they do is they don't even film with a camera during those scenes.
Whoa.
What they do is they have, like, let's say you have a room like this and we're wearing all this shit. All they're getting is, and also instead of having like the dots on the face, they have a camera, like a boom mic that points at their head.
Mm-hmm.
So they get they basically get the whole performance. And so they can just block out the scene like they're actually in real life. They don't have to like, hey, lean a little bit so the camera can see you. So what they do is that, let's say we record a scene of me punching you in the face and you getting knocked out and all the ladies kissing me because I knocked you out, right? So then we do that scene. And it doesn't matter where our faces are because the camera's right here the whole time. And then in post, he has that data, that 3D data, and then he can go in and put the camera wherever he wants. Oh, awesome. So like usually if you film a scene, it would be, all right, a take of a close-up, a take of a wide shot. So you have to do the scene 30 times. But he's like, we do it 5 times. And we can change it up a different because it doesn't have to match in between shots, right? Yeah. You can put the camera anywhere. So he can go, all right, put the camera here, 50 millimeter lens, and put the f-stop at this. And put this filter over it. Like, he can do that the whole movie, which is crazy. But also, I don't want, because this also did win Best Art Direction because the sets are fantastic. People overlook a lot of the practical stuff that they did in this. There's some great explosions with what's his name, with Quaritch, where there's an explosion on the planet he's on, and he's shooting Jake Sully, and he goes, oh, and he gets thrown around. I'm like, those explosions are very heavy, and like anything that is practical is very well done, and the sets look fantastic, and the whole world building of it is very good as well. Yeah, I mean, the design is just, you actually are getting transported to a whole nother world. Yeah. It's beautiful. I mean, that's 2009. That's one of the first movie experiences in my brain that I remember. Right. Did you see it in the theater? I did. Oh, you lucky ducky! I didn't see it. I saw it with my dad, and I remember just being like, "What?" What'd your dad think? We both were just. We walked out of the movie theater. I remember being like, "What?" Like, actually, though, everybody was. Yeah. Everybody was. It was that as a kid. I remember thinking in my head that was a moment. Right. That was something different. People shit on it. Like, a lot of people. This was like the first James Cameron movie in the age of the internet. So a lot of people like shit on it. But no, that's a crazy influential movie. Mm-hmm. And no other movie has really done it to that extent since. At least that good. You know what I mean? Yeah. No, that's
I remember that was like one thing where I'm sort of proud of myself for taking
Yeah.
the time out of like my younger self being like, I just saw something pretty
Yeah.
incredible right
I can't wait
there.
to talk about that on a podcast one day.
I'm gonna have a good moment talking about that on a podcast one day. No.
Okay, what do we got next?
On December 18th, 2009, Avatar opens to critical praise and a $77 million opening weekend. It received an A cinema score and quickly became a global phenomenon.
Yeah, so that was a crazy thing, and I think maybe the thing thematically that had it resonate. I mentioned, like with Terminator, all that nuclear war and the anxieties about that were one of the reasons why it was, I guess, relevant or had some urgency to those movies and why they did well. But in this, I talked about the shift to climate change or climate alarmism or something like that, or climate anxiety is probably a better term. And this movie represents and people like at the time it was criticized by somebody for being like left wing and like heavy tree hugging bullshit or whatever. But it's like I don't even know if you watch the movie. I don't even know if it's that. I don't even know if it's left wing at all. I mean, it sort of is where there's a crappy scene where Jake Sully is like, "See, this is how it's done. You take what you want." And I'm like, I don't even know what's that. What are you saying there?
Mm-hmm.
But the rest of the movie is pretty. I wouldn't say I don't want to say nonpartisan. That's not really the right word. But it's not very, overly judgmental and like signaling. It doesn't really signal you to what's going on. It kind of just shows you. So there's a 21st century anxiety over the encroaching machine world, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's a 21st anxiety over, our effect on the planet and what's happening. And I don't say that. I think that transcends any political, whether you're conservative or liberal. It's like there is a collective anxiety about the state of the planet, right? And I think what the RDA, what the humans are supposed to represent, is like, oh, humans are bad. We get it. It's like no. The RDA represents, sort of the one extreme of human behavior, that being greed or whatever you want, that is destroying the planet. And then the Na'vi represent the desire to live in harmony with nature, right? That's, that wants to preserve the planet, right? But if you live like the RDA, that's not the answer. If you live purely like the RDA, because like eventually you're going to get burned and the world's going to end, and then you're going to, in Avatar 2, you're going to have to go and terraform another world, right? But even living like the Na'vi isn't, the end all be all as well, because what you really want to go back to living in the woods, right? So I think the whole thing about the Avatar franchise is finding the perfect balance or harmony in between those two extremes, right? Finding a balance between the natural and the artificial or the machine world, right? Paradise, the word paradise literally means enclosed garden, which is literally, or enclosed park. So it's basically nature with an artificial structure around it. That's literally the definition of paradise. So that's a perfect balance between the natural world and the artificial world. And I think the Avatar franchise is much more equipped to be the franchise of the 21st century more than Star Wars or Marvel, especially since those movies have sort of been compromised by I guess a less intense, but the same sort of idea of corporatism that's depicted in Avatar, where they're kind of just churning them out and they're like, all right, whatever, get these done. They really have no relevance anymore. Shut up. I did a suggestive hand signal by accident. But they don't really have any relevancy like anymore, like Avatar does. And I think Avatar is a much more appropriate franchise for the state of the world today. How do you like that? How was that?
I also, because you said, because it's not super left wing in the sense that, I mean, the Na'vi are definitely the good characters in the movie, but they are also shown in ways where some of the ways they go about handling it isn't the best way to do it, and then they get themselves into trouble.
Yeah, and they still have to fend for themselves in the forest and stuff. It's not a perfect way of living.
But the way the way they handle the humans being there is not the best. Probably wasn't the best way to go about it, because then, I mean, obviously at the point where they're getting violent, the humans are knocking down their forest, but they're still very violent with the human beings, and then it causes more and more trouble.
It's like when Jake Sully's like, no, this is gonna end bad for you, because James Cameron talks about like one of the inspirations is, a higher level technologically civilization meeting a lower level technological civilization. The higher one always wins, the lower one's always going to lose. That is, the Native Americans or whatever. He goes, there's one instance of where in New Zealand where they actually kind of won and they got their own shit going on. He goes, but this is, I'm trying to talk about like something like Vietnam or the Native Americans or something like that. And yeah.
Are you the New Zealand one? Are you talking about that? There's like one island where, if anybody visit, no, where is that?
Well,
do you know what I'm talking about?
New Zealand is like on the edge of the map. It's gonna fall off any day now. But it's like whatever the indigenous population there, I guess with the British, was at war with them, and then they just came to a stalemate. And the British was like, all right, fair enough, big dog.
Peace out, bro. I ain't got no money to make here. Whatever. Peace.
Yeah. There's no oil. So no oil. No oil.
So no oil. I'm out.
All right. What do we got next?
It was nominated for 9 Oscars, 3 of which it won for Best Cinematography, Visual Effects, and Art Direction. However, Cameron went home without an Oscar.
So there was a big thing that I genuinely don't think it was actually there was any merit to it or any meat behind it. But remember I mentioned Catherine Bigelow, his third wife? At the same year, she was nominated for Best Director for Hurt Locker. And Hurt Locker was also nominated for Best Picture. And James Cameron, people were in the media was like, James Cameron's mad and he wants to win. But he went on Charlie Rose and was like, no, it's like best case scenario, Avatar wins Best Picture and she wins Best Director. That'd be a dream scenario. Like I don't want to win. I want the Cruz work to be recognized. I don't really care about my work. I already have an Oscar. Who cares?
I'm James Cameron.
Yeah. So, but she ended up winning Best Director, the first female, and then Hurt Locker also won Best Picture. But I do think Avatar is a worthy Best Picture. Again, people shit on it, and they're always like, "Well, the story is simple." And for some reason, there's such a strange fascination with the Avatar franchise saying, "Well, the story is simple." It's like, shut up. I don't understand why that's so important. Like even in the new movie, like narratively, it's fairly standard stuff. And I'm like, so is every movie that's released. What are you talking about? Why are you saying that with this one? I don't. But even if it is simple, it's like sure, fair enough. That's you won.
Yeah.
It's still, if you look at the structure of this movie and how it plays narratively, beat for beat, it's literally perfect. Whatever quality you think this movie is, whether it's shit or awesome or great, which I think it's great, that line of quality is flat the entire way through. It is so sturdy and the quality is so consistent throughout, no matter what you think of it, that you can't deny that it's a perfectly solid ship, right? That I don't understand. Why?
Well, it's just like any. I mean, there's no reason to get overly complex. People confuse like something that's complex with its quality, and there's really no correlation. I mean, there can be, but in art, music, not everybody likes freeform jazz, but that's the most complex version of music. There's other complex versions, but a lot of people just like Taylor Swift, and that's okay too. Her songs are simple. Her songs are not freeform jazz, but it's
what did you just say about Taylor Swift?
They're simple songs.
I like Taylor Swift.
They're good songs.
I actually have a Taylor Swift poster in my room.
Do you?
Even though I know I can't name a single song other than Bad Blood, because I went to see the movie and they were giving out the posters. I'm like, all right, I'll take one.
But saying like the story is simple isn't fair to say that it's not good. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Because it does the simple story perfectly. And there, there is some stuff, like there is some dialogue that's not great. There's a scene where, what's her name? Grace Augustine, when she's in her avatar, she goes, "Think fast." And it sounds like it feels like you're in a video game all of a sudden.
Yeah.
There is some shitty lines or whatever and some shitty scenes, like the one I described to Jake going like, "This is how it happens," But Quaritch, Miles Quaritch, Stephen Lang, he is so good. He's the best performance in that movie. In the whole world of this Avatar thing, he's like one of the most compelling things to watch. This low gravity will make you soft. You get soft. Pandora will shit you out dead with zero warning. Yeah. Like, he's just full of these crazy lines that are so good. And I think he's underrated as a villain as well.
No, he's badass.
Yeah, he's pretty cool.
Also, the mech suits, I feel like that traveled all the way from Aliens.
Yes, exactly.
Sorta.
Yeah, that definitely. And also, there is that through line of the sci-fi with Sigourney
and with aliens and Avatar, the mech suits in Alien and the mech suits in Avatar as well.
Dude, what if aliens show up in Avatar in one of them? That'd be pretty sick, actually.
That would kind of ruin it all. That would totally throw out any themes I just talked about.
Why?
Because how would you relate anything I just said about like the machine world and the natural world and the conflict between that? How would that relate to just an alien coming in and going, "Hey,
Sick."
all right, idiot. All right, let's see what else I got. Let's see if there's anything else I got here. Yeah, I think I pretty much got everything. Yeah, and the humans and Na'vi represent both sides of the human coin. Very, very good point, Johnny. All right, yeah, it's pretty much everything. What else can we talk about? Oh, yeah. Oh, but the thing about the CGI that it 15 years later, it does hold up. I've so I guess almost 15 years later. I was surprised because I've seen Avatar, Avatar the second one. That's the official title, and I watched that. I'm like, okay, so this is photorealistic. I'm curious to see how I like the first one. And you watch the first one, but the very smart thing that they do in that is they very rarely cross over the worlds of like they very rarely put a human next to an avatar for a long time, right? So when you're in the world of Avatar, it's since there's so if Star Wars and Marvel have been de-aging people, right? And when you look at it, like what's the guy Tarkin in Rogue One? You see him and you're like, why is one of his eyes lower than the other one? Like he's all droopy and he looks all weird and draggy. You're like, something's off because humans are really good at seeing what's wrong with other humans.
Yeah.
Right. But with Avatar people, with blue Na'vi people, we're not as good as it. So their presence, in some sense, is already stylized. We're not sure exactly what is supposed to be going on here. And you cannot tell. Like everything still looks very, very good. And I don't think there's a single bad visual effect in that entire movie. Everything is consistent. Nothing ever feels out of place. The only time you can sort of notice a difference, a slight difference in the CGI, the CGI is weird, is when you have a human in the frame with the Na'vi, because now you have a reference for what reality is. But when you take out that reference and you're just in Pandora, everything has weight. It's completely believable. Nothing feels like it's shot on a green screen. It's fantastic. I think there's less bad visual effect shots in Avatar 1 than in Avatar 2.
Really?
Yes. I'll explain what they are in Avatar 2.
After Avatar, since the two leads of Avatar, Sam Worthington and Zoe Saldana, were unknowns upon release, Cameron himself became the star of the movie in media. The strong environmentalist message of Avatar seemed to have resonated globally. This pulled Cameron into becoming an activist for the first time in his career.
So there was a lot of indigenous groups and other groups worldwide that were calling him to help because they were like, oh, he's the guy now. And he was like, what? So there was a thing where he had to go down to Brazil. They invited him down to Brazil because they were proposing a new dam that was being built, so that they can power some power plant or some factory somewhere or whatever. And he went down there and was like, hey, I made Avatar. Don't you do this. Don't do it. And he went down there and he kind of did a lot of, I don't know if humanitarian, but he did a lot of environmentalist type stuff around that. And he sort of became a face of that for a while. And he wasn't even sure. He was like, I might just stop directing movies. This seems like it might be a much more productive, practical thing than just making a movie about environmentalism or whatever. And he also went down to the furthest point ever, more than anybody else in the history of the world. He went down to the Mariana Trench and went down 5 miles in a submarine.
That's terrifying.
To the deepest point, deeper than anybody's ever gone.
Yeah.
He's the guy who holds that record. So, which is crazy. But also, they did it in 1960. They on a different point on Earth, but like the same distance down. They went down there in 1960. How were we able to do that in 1960? And it takes us 50 years to do it again.
Well, I think
also, how many balls did the guys who have?
I know, right? Yeah. I'm sure. I wouldn't imagine that they were just like down there all comfortable.
Yeah.
I feel like it might have been crunching up on them or something.
they're like, dude, I'm getting crunched up here. You gotta pull me up.
We gotta go back up.
I'm getting crunched.
That might just be a total technical limitation.
Yeah.
You really can only go down so far. The water gets so heavy at a certain point. So who knows? I don't know how. I'm no scientist, but I don't know if that's like maybe that's just the deepest anyone will ever go.
Well, that's the deepest part. You can't go deeper.
Oh, he reached the bottom. Oh wow. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So then, that is the deepest part. I didn't know that. On January 7th, 2010, Cameron announced that several Avatar sequels were in the works.
Yeah, so he said he wrote the script for Avatar 2, and he was like, yeah, it's all right. But then he threw it away and then and basically hired a writer's room to make 4 sequels.
Mm-hmm.
And originally it was 3, but then 2 became 2 scripts. So then, it turned into 4. Mm-hmm. And it was Rick Jaffa, Amanda Silver, Shane Shalaris, maybe, and then Josh Friedman. And he basically, what he had them do is go, all right, we developed a story for all 4 of these movies, but then he didn't tell everybody which movie they'd be writing, so they would put equal attention on each movie. Because then if I said you were going to write Avatar 3, whenever we would talk about Avatar 2, you'd be like, Avatar 3. Yeah, you wouldn't be, So they all have a story credit on Avatar 2, but Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver and James Cameron are credited with the script. And then Josh Friedman is going to do another one, and then this one. And, yeah, so that was pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm. In 2011, he produced a movie titled James Cameron's Sanctum.
Yeah, I don't think he had anything to do with it. I think somebody that he knew was just like, hey, can I put your name on the movie? Because Avatar just came out and it made $2 billion. And he's like, yeah, sure, go for it. Because the only reason I watched it when I was little is because I saw James Cameron's name. I'm like, oh, he's the Avatar guy. So I watched the movie. I'm like, this kind of sucks.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Next.
In 2018,
that's probably fine.
Cameron produced Alita, Battle Angel, directed by Robert Rodriguez.
Robert Rodriguez did El Mariachi and the Spy Kids movies. You should read his book, Rebel Without a Cause, or Rebel Without a Crew, which is very, very good. Alita Battle Angel I liked a lot until I got to the third act and the movie ended. There's no third act to the movie.
Damn.
I was so pissed. I'm like, oh, nice. I was genuinely like, oh, this is the point where she goes to fight the villain. And then the movie, I saw Alita Battle Angel, and I was completely like, what?
Mm-hmm.
I did not see that coming at all. But I'm excited to see a sequel.
Okay, there's a sequel.
Yeah, they're
coming
developing
out.
it.
In 2019, Cameron returned to the Terminator franchise to produce. In 2019, Cameron returned to the Terminator franchise to produce Terminator Dark Fate, directed by Tim Miller of Deadpool fame.
Yeah, it was fine. They did the weird thing with Arnold. He said, "I'll be back." Yeah, that was in the era of movies where they would disregard all the shitty movies and be like, "No, this is a sequel to 2."
Mm-hmm.
So they just disregarded all the other movies.
Oh,
and
they
like,
were
hey, Linda Hamilton's back, and she was great in it. That was fun seeing her again.
Mm-hmm.
But, kind of forgettable.
Avatar: The Way of Water, 2022. The sequels were first announced to be released in 2014 and 2015, but principal photography on Avatar 2 finally got underway on September 25th, 2017.
Yes, they were originally, in 2010, they were originally announced to come out then, but he talked about how we didn't really have a release date. We just knew we should start filming whenever we had the big pile of stuff we needed together, then we could finally go forward. And there isn't a lot of production stories like, oh, this actor told this guy to buzz off and they don't like each other or whatever. There isn't a lot of juicy stuff like that like we've had in the other movies because this is sort of recent. There is some stuff with casting, but there isn't, there's not a lot known of production. They did on Avatar 2 and 3 probably, maybe 4, they did film some scenes with the kids for the live action scenes because they didn't want some of the kids to age out. So maybe with Jack Champion, with Spider, they filmed, because also they filmed this in 2017. The movie came out in 2022. There was a 5-year difference. So that Jack Champion had to film scenes from 3 and 4 as well, as long as 2, so he didn't age out and stuff. So yeah.
And with a $350 million budget, would this be considered that it's ballooning? Or did they always just expect to spend that much money?
It's kind of hard to, since they filmed so much of it all together, and that they're kind of been in a constant state of filming it almost, it feels like, or being in production on all of them, that I don't know if the budget ballooned or got out of whack, or is it just like, okay, of course you're going to spend that much money on it. Because, adjusted for inflation, it might be the same as $237 million at this point.
Yeah.
In 2009, which is the budget for the first Avatar. So, but also, it takes, sure, you have to film, but all that equipment that you're pioneering is so expensive. And then you throw in, because Avatar, they got it, right? But then you throw in, all right, now they have to do that underwater.
Yeah.
Because half of this movie takes place underwater, which is insane. And yeah, so that maybe that throws in a whole new infrastructure and the technology, perhaps that really. And also, it's hard to know because you're filming 3 movies at once, so it's like, well, which money went to which movie? That might just be like
I didn't think about it in that way.
Yeah.
I forgot that they were kind of they're kind of just in a constant state of filming, and they're filming everything.
Yeah.
So, because I was originally thinking, why is it so large? Obviously the equipment is still going to be expensive, but his way of filming is super efficient.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering why it's so large, but that makes sense. Leading up to the release of Avatar: The Way of Water, people debated whether the movie would bomb or repeat the success of the first movie.
Nobody had anybody who tells you they had a clue that it was going to make money is lying to you. I thought it was going to make money, but I had no idea. I did do like a month before the movie came out. I did do a box office prediction of mine, and I made the concession that I can't predict China. I'm just gonna say it makes 50 million in China because the market at that time, they were going through like COVID stuff, and you couldn't predict what was going to happen in China. So I said, all right, given that it makes 50 million in China, it's going to make 1.9, right? And then it ended up making like 250 in China, right? So so that means that my figure was about 2.1, and it made 2.3. So I was within a range of 200 million. So I did get pretty good. I did a very good prediction of how it was going to do worldwide, and also the distribution I did good as well, between international and domestic. But nobody knew, and even when the movie came out and it made $135 million opening weekend, people will go, "Oh, Avatar bombs! It needs $2 billion to break even," because James Cameron said, it needs to become like the 3rd or 4th highest grossing movie to break even, and people were like, "Oh, well, the 3rd highest grossing movie is Infinity War, and that made $2 billion, so it needs $2 billion to break even." But it's like, no, he was probably referring to domestic, which would be like 800 million or something like that. The real break-even point was probably, what I estimated, was probably around $1 billion, which it easily got, of course. But it took like a few weeks until people were like, all right, it's actually a giant success. And the first Avatar came out. The first Avatar made 77 million opening weekend, and they went, Avatar bombs, baby.
I personally just never doubted that it would. I don't know. In my mind, I just thought of it because it's sort of like a cultural event at this point.
At first, like, it was a cultural event in 2009, but then culturally, it didn't really have a lot of staying power. Like, nobody really talks about. There's no Jake Sully action figure. There's no media that derived from it. It's not like a traditional franchise in the sense of Star Wars or Marvel. People are like, there's a lot of people who are like, can you name a character from Avatar? It's like, I can't because I've seen it, but it's like, am I confident that the mainstream audiences knows who Jake Sully is before 2022? I'm not sure. Nobody really knew.
Yeah, you've mentioned that to me before. That it's sort of an anomaly in that sense that it makes so much money in the box office, and then it's not like Star Wars. People are diehard Star Wars fans. People aren't diehard Avatar fans.
Yeah, I mean there is now since the second movie came out, but before that, there was nobody dresses up as them for Comic-Con.
I'm sure. I'm sure there's still, but it's not as. I mean, even if there are diehard Avatar fans out there, it's not a cultural thing like Star Wars or other things that just completely take over and almost have like a cult to it.
Nobody goes around being like, instead of saying like, oh yeah, okay, Captain America, nobody goes, yeah, okay, Jake Sully.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Okay, Natiri.
yeah. Nobody would ever say that. Actually, Avatar: The Way of the Water opened on December 15th.
The Way of the what?
The Way of Water opened on December 15th, 2022, to generally positive reviews from critics and grossed $135 million in its opening weekend, which didn't stop the trades from saying it was a box office bomb.
Yes, we covered that.
Audiences gave the movie an A cinema score, and it went on to gross $2.3 billion off a $350 million budget.
I mentioned that the first Avatar, I think, is a great movie. And I mentioned how in that movie, I said, whatever quality you think about it, it stays at that quality throughout the entire movie. It's an extremely solid and sturdy ship. Mm-hmm. With Avatar: The Way of Water, I also think it's a great movie, but it takes a much bumpier ride to get there, and I do think it has a lot of leaks in it. And I will explain what those leaks are. That was good. How about that? And I will explain what those leaks are. So, I will say, look, okay, first hour is solidly good. right? Second hour is when I think the movie starts to crumble a little bit, where it starts to get a little bit disjointed, and some of the stuff with the kids doesn't work that well, and that's probably the weakest point of the movie. But then the last hour is absolutely fantastic, and that's what the last hour is what makes it a great movie, because that's a very important hour because it's what you're ending on, right? Because if your first hour was fantastic and then the second hour was shit and then the last one was good, it's like, okay, it's a good movie. But then if the whole movie is great and then the last hour is shitty, then it's a shitty movie. You know, that last hour has a lot more staying power than the rest of the movie, and I think like in the original Avatar, any criticisms of that is, oh, there's some bad dialogue, the story's simple, whatever. But none of them, I never watched Avatar and went, that's a strange creative choice. In Avatar, there's sort of like a handful of them. So the first one that I noticed was, this is a very minor thing, but Jake goes, you know, I'm so good at speaking Na'vi now that it's basically English to me. And then you see the subtitles fade away, and that basically establishes a rule that, oh, whenever you see somebody speaking English, they're speaking, or a Na'vi speaking English, they're speaking in Na'vi, actually. But that would only work if they were, if inside the universe they were supposed to be speaking Na'vi for the rest of the movie. But there's scenes where they speak English again. So, but they're always speaking English. So why even make it? That kind of was weird, but it's not. You can just ignore that. But then the other thing is with Kiri's character, played by Sigourney Weaver. I like her as a character, and I think her physical model is good, and I think she's believable, and I like what they're doing with her. But like having Sigourney Weaver's adult, mature voice and her weird, wavering accent is really strange. So because she's like, hey, God, like I think she feels like a teenager, but her voice is, it's like, why does she sound like a woman? But also sometimes she has an accent and sometimes she doesn't. So it's like, why not give her as strong of an accent as her brothers Loak and Nataim, or don't give her an accent at all? You know, why is it this weird, like, why can't that just be like everybody, like it's weird. And then, but there's another miscast, which I think is a miscast, because the role was originally supposed to go to Edward Norton, which is General Ardmore, who is played by Edie Falco in the movie. I like her as an actor. I haven't seen her in that much stuff. I'm sure she's a wonderful lady, but I thought she was completely out of place in the movie. And also Ed Norton passed on the role because he wanted the chance to play a Na'vi in the future movie. But she just felt like her voice was so out of sync with the rest of the movie, where she's like, "Good to meet you, Colonel." "Oh, hello." You know, it was weird, and she just felt like a lady wearing a costume. You know, I never believed that she was a general or that she was cool or anything like that. You know, I wish they're like, get fucking Linda Hamilton.
Yeah,
get Sarah Connor. Just play. Like, who cares? Do it. You know. So that's some stuff that I don't think. But again, we talked about. Actually, no, I'll let you talk because I've been talking a lot.
What did you think about the scenes where this is one thing where I felt like they missed a little bit, and it's just me wanting something out of it when they kind of are going in as the Black Ops team, and they're all like, there was so many opportunities. I feel like they didn't use those characters to their full extent of what they could have been. Do you know what I'm saying?
They kind of had a strange role in the middle where they kind of had this. They were in this weird limbo a lot of the time, where like, we speak Na'vi, we think Na'vi, and then they just went and got a flying guy, and then they're like, we found him. And it's like, so you didn't really do anything. They didn't really speak. You didn't even talk to a Na'vi person. You know, it was weird. That was a strange, because then they go back to the ship and then they find their location and then they just go there off of a boat ship anyway. They don't even take the animals there.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to see them act more as a unit.
Yeah.
And do some cool, like, Black Ops type shit, but use their athleticism. They still just kind of act like humans. They never really, you know what I'm saying? They never really use their abilities, which they were given as Na'vi.
You never really see them like climbing shit or anything.
Yeah, they just still act. I mean,
except
like
for
humans.
Quaritch, he does some cool stuff. But like, you know.
But as a unit, I mean,
yeah,
that's what I meant. Like, it would have been cool to see some.
Yeah, they felt underused. I remember seeing them in the trailer, going, "Oh shit, that's gonna be nuts."
Yeah.
But I do think, again, it's a sequel. And I do think it does, like, having Quaritch come back as a Na'vi is such a brilliant idea. And the way he wakes up and just sees a Na'vi and just punches him, he's going, get away from me. And they're like, no, shit.
it's you look at yourself and he's like, son of a bitch, like ain't that a bitch? I'm a Navina. Like that's a great idea. And then, but also we talked about like the global resonance of the original Avatar with the environmentalism stuff like that. That's still prevalent in here. But like one of the things to keep it globally resonant and not have it repeat itself, at least plot wise, is to just focus on the center of the movie being a family, which is that's such a great that's such a good idea to do that because family is going to resonate forever, global, no matter where you are on the planet, you know, and it's not localized to America like a lot of movies are. And what they do with Jake and his family, what they do with Kiri and her relationship with Grace. And because she's her mom, she's also part of Jake's family, but she doesn't have a dad. So like, what's going on with her? She's sort of like a Luke Skywalker type character, and the way Quaritch has a relationship with Spider, who was Quaritch's son, not this Quaritch's son. They're technically nothing to each other, but he sees Spider as a son. Like that's gonna go somewhere, and I think this movie, as a whole, it works on its own, and I don't think it feels like a movie where it's like, hey, you just saw the movie, we'll get ready for the next one. I think it's a very solid, great movie, and it's very emotional at the end, and it has some great the action at the end is so great because one of the things I love about it is like when you see an action movie in another, like when you see action in a movie, it's usually I punch you and then something lands on you perfectly, right? But the thing I like about it, it's such a little thing, is like, you know, Jake punches Quaritch, and then Quaritch runs into a thing that like sort of inconveniences him a little bit, where it doesn't throw him on the ground. And he has to get up and go. But it's just like shit. There's a thing there, you know, and there's like that. It just makes it feel so real. Also, I can't even believe haven't talked about the visual effects. You look in this movie. The close-ups on the characters' faces, they look they are like you can't get any better. They look like that's what an alien would look like.
Definitely.
And I'm beating a dead horse probably saying that, but it is crazy how good that looks.
Yeah, they have that down. Like, there's no question about that. That stuff.
Did you see this in the theater?
I did. Yeah.
What did you think the first time?
Saw it with you, jerk. Saw it with you. Some kind of.
Well, I've seen this movie 2.5 times, 3.5 times.
Oh yeah, well
the
yeah.
first time I watched it in the
I had
theater,
to keep hearing about that the whole time.
God. I watched half of this movie in the theater, and then somebody was vaping, and the fire alarm went off. And I know what they were doing. They're like, oh, it takes an hour for the movie to restart.
They just didn't.
And it's like, no, I fucking, it's a digital projector. You don't have to. You can just go to the beginning. The only reason you don't want it is you don't want to give refunds to all the people who've bought tickets. To the next screening, because now you can't have the next screening. It was like, okay. But so that was it sucked too, because the moment it cut out was when it was just getting good. And they go, we can't fire on the toucan. It'll upset the natives. And he goes, yeah, it will. One native in particular.
And then, that's
like,
so bad.
Son of a bitch.
It's so bad.
So that sucked.
I think one of the things that this movie does really well is make you realize how there's so many other colonies.
Yes.
And groups of Na'vi that all have their own special thing that they're gonna obviously get to in other movies, but they touch on it a little bit throughout the whole thing.
It was a good idea because people were like, "Oh, it just sounded repetitive." It felt like we were doing the first movie again. I liked it because it's been like 12 years since the last one, right? So we have to have a way of rediscovering Pandora without rediscovering it all over again. Like, hey, remember this?
Yeah.
Remember this? So, like, I think the smart decision that they do is, yes, we're back to Pandora. You know this, but then they have us rediscover Pandora. They have us rediscover Pandora or revisit Pandora through another, region of it or another way of living.
Biome.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that was a good idea.
And it's like the first movie, it's so large that you get a sense that never in my mind during the first one did my mind think, oh, is there other types of Na'vi? I just thought that was that. So that was cool that they brought in different biomes, different, just the way they would interact with it and how they evolved differently.
Yeah, I like that a lot, how the water Na'vi have the bigger chest because of their lungs, their lung capacity, and they also have those weird fins on their arms, and their tails are sort of fins. That was excellent.
Yeah.
And the middle half is, I think, the middle half is where you can kind of cut out a lot of big chunks of it. Like, there's a scene where Loak and the other kid who's bullying him, they bring him out to go
outside the reef, which is dangerous. And he shoots a fish and he goes, "Hey guys," and then they leave him there. And then he gets attacked by a giant big shark thing. And then the toucan saves him, and then he flies around. He swims around with him, and it's nice. And then he goes back. He goes, "Yo, I made a friend." They're like, "Shut up, that didn't happen." And then he goes back, and he's like, "Hey, they don't believe me." And then they fly around again. And then he goes back and goes, "Hey, what happened? They said you're a bad guy." And then they fly around again, or they swim around again. And then he goes back another time. And it's like, dude, you can just cut out the second time he goes back to them. Put that cool shot of him touching the water while he's upside down.
Mm-hmm.
Put that in the first montage when we see him. It would be simple. And then have him just go back later when they say, "Oh, he's a dangerous guy." And then go back and be like, "Hey, are you dangerous?" And then he shows you what's going on. Like there's stuff like that where you can cut out. I do think the best version of this movie is probably like closer to 3 hours and 3 hours and 14.
Mm-hmm. It was nominated for 4 Oscars, including Best Sound, Best Picture, Best Production Design, and Best Visual Effect, which it won.
So, I guess we could just say that the effects, the best visual effects wins for 2025, 2029, 2031 are just gonna go to Avatar. And I like that these are. I don't think that I'm not saying that the next one's gonna be nominated for Best Picture, but I like that these movies kind of transcend every quadrant of movies where it's like, oh, it's also an Oscar movie, but it's also the highest grossing movie type thing. I like that a lot. And also, I have some stuff written down here about how I remember I told you that I didn't think the first Avatar had a single bad visual effect in it, and I think in this one, so there's nothing in this movie where I go, that looks bad. But there is some stuff, again, mixing the humans with the CGI. When they're getting when the guys are getting tugged along on the boats, and the toucan is dragging the boat, and then the boat hits a rock, and you see all the guys go up, and then the boat lands, and then they all come down. Like that looks a little bit weird. Mm-hmm. There's a few shots like that. It's like 3 or 4 shots in the whole movie that look a little bit jarring, but everything else, it's amazing how like I think people I think people forget how insane of a feeling it is that these people feel like they're actually real.
Yeah.
Like I'm never looking at them going, that's a little rubbery. It's like, no, that looks
just like flesh.
Yeah.
Or whatever they call flesh on
yeah.
Pandora.
Also, you know what's funny about the sex scene of the first movie? It's like he just leans in and kisses her. It's like, how do you know that they're aliens? Like, how do you know they kiss each other? Like, how do you know they don't just do some weird shit with their hands and they're like,
yeah,
oh
what
my
is
God,
it? Yeah.
You know? Also, do they have dicks?
I don't even want to get into it because I thought about that. Like,
I was thinking about that every time I see like they're just wearing like one of those flaps. I'm like, let me see his dick. I'm like in Boogie Nights. I'm going.
Oh yeah.
Just leaning my head all the way over trying.
I don't think you'd want to see that thing. They're like 15 feet.
I want to see what it looks like.
How tall are they?
They're like 12 feet tall.
I don't want to see that thing.
What
No way.
What if it's tiny?
That would be hilarious.
That'd be really funny.
Just like us, man.
No.
Just
like you, pal. But also, there are some great practical effects in this, and also the ending feels like a kind of a mishmash in a good way of all Cameron's movies. There are some references to other Cameron movies, like in True Lies, when Spider's banging the chair against the glass. That's a nod to True Lies. When Helen Tasker is banging the chair against the glass, get me out of here. Then also Titanic in the Abyss with all the underwater stuff, and also the ship turning over and everybody drowning and shit. That's a throwback to Titanic.
That's another thing. I feel like we need to talk about the whales stuff.
Yes, that was the environmental thing of this movie. I kind of like that idea where every kind of movie tackles an environmental thing. That's fun. But yeah, and like the killing of the whale. They're basically whales, but I like how they talk about just like killer whales, where they say that killer whales might be more capable of emotion than we are.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they talk about that with the guy goes there. They have more intense emotions. They have math and philosophy and stuff like that, which is very interesting. Mm-hmm. And
yeah, that's a big thing to bring up. I mean, a lot of humans, I feel like, don't regard the fact that there are other living beings that have emotions.
Yeah, we're kind of just like, yo. Nice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We might be the most intelligent, but we might not be the most emotionally oriented creatures.
Yeah, exactly.
On this earth.
Avatar 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 7. As of this recording, Avatar 3 will release in December of 2025. Avatar 4 in December of 2029, and Avatar 5 in December of 2031. Cameron recently announced plans for Avatar 6 and 7, which he said he will not direct.
Yeah, I wonder who would take up the mantle, and I wonder by then if he's not directing them, if they're ever going to lose their soul in a way. And I think it's interesting that the next Avatar is 3 years away, and the next Avatar after that is 4 years away, and then the next one after that is 2. It's like, what's the logic behind that? Because I do think because if you run the risk of like a Marvel type thing where it's like, oh, if you have 4 movies in a year, people are going to be like, well, I'll skip this one, right? But having them be farther and farther away from each other might be a good idea for longevity, even though you're going to make less money, I guess, than just churning out like 10 in 10 years, you know? But I don't know. I'm excited for these movies because apparently they just get better and better. James Cameron talked about, he goes, yeah, I handed in the script for Avatar 2. I got like 4 pages of notes. And then I handed in the script for Avatar 3, and I got, a page and a half of notes. And then I handed in the script for Avatar 4, and the only note back I got on it was, holy fuck.
Really?
That's the actual note that he got from the lady. So apparently they get pretty, and apparently Avatar 5 goes to Earth.
Damn.
I'm so excited to see what they do. Because
Yeah,
they showed Earth in the original Avatar in a deleted scene. There's an extended cut, and there's a deleted scene where you see Jake Sully on Earth. And it's like basically like Blade Runner or something like that. I'm sure they would have a much more articulate design for Earth more in that deleted scene. But it was pretty cool. They do a reference to 1984 where he's in his apartment and he just has a shitty little bed and then the whole wall is just a TV. And I think that's a reference to 1984. 'Cause that's how I think what's his name, Winston, in 1984. That's his room is structured like that. It's just a big TV and he can't get away from it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm excited for them all. I just hope they don't start to get old. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't think that, because I think they're smart to have it centered. Like, they're gonna have space battles.
Yeah.
There's a space battle that was supposed to be in this one, and they moved it to the next one.
Oh, really? In this one? I don't know how they would have.
Well, because they split 2 and 3, and so it was supposed to be one movie, and then they split it into 2. But I'm like there's because once you go, because the next one is apparently going to involve like some volcano stuff.
Oh, that would be cool.
Which is interesting, and there might be big red avatars running around.
Oh, that would be
or
cool.
Navis. But then 4, they can go to space, and 5 they go to Earth. So there's always maybe a new frontier, a new thing that it doesn't get stale.
Do you think they're just gonna? Do you think they'll jump around in time a lot, like in the future?
I think they're probably will. I think there's a time jump between 4 and 5. I think. I think the crazy thing that might happen is Neytiri might get kidnapped and taken to Earth. That'd be pretty sick.
Yeah, and then, do you think Jake Sully's gonna make it through all the movies?
Ooh, I don't know. Because they are setting up the children to kind of be taking.
Yeah.
I think Loak is going to be the narrator of the next one. It's not going to be Jake Sully. I don't know where I heard that. I feel like it's in my head. I don't know if they'll ever kill him though. That might be too. I don't know. It depends how people like the kids. I don't think Neytiri is ever going to die. I think what would be a cool premise for 5 is just Neytiri. She gets taken to Earth and then she escapes prison and then she's just a lady who lives in the woods.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to predict like where they're gonna go with it.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Yeah,
I mean, they could easily just spend each movie on a new biome, which would be cool.
But that would get. I mean,
that would get old.
Yeah, that would get old. It's like now it's the mountain. It's like okay, pal.
Are they floating? I'm not in.
Yeah, exactly. It's all floating mountains. You like care about one that obeys gravity?
Yeah.
Also, I want to know how those mountains float. Is it just a bunch of unobtainium?
I don't know. Don't ask me.
I need answers, Danny.
They never mentioned it. Maybe it's just, I don't know. Maybe there's, who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. What'd you think about that one, guys? Was that one good? I think that was pretty funny. If you're here, that's crazy. It's like, stop poking. What are you?
Sorry.
God damn it, Danny. I'm sorry about that guy. I'm sorry you had to see that. They listen for 4 hours and you give them that? Are you kidding me? Stop!
Sorry.
They're going to click off. Wait, it's the end of the video. You can click off.
Oh, yeah. You're
yes. We probably. I don't know. Well, I know who we're gonna do next, but I don't know if I should spoil it. But it would. It would be very stellar if I can tell you. All I can say is that there's a lot of prestige in what we're gonna do next, and I'm really
I'm really happy that you're following a lot of what we're doing, and it's gonna be hard to sleep because I'm gonna have insomnia just in preparation for doing this next podcast, and it's gonna be I got some dark nights ahead, but
I was wondering how you were gonna
you
get
know?
that one in there.
but I'm not Dunkirk yet.
Keep going.
Oppenheimer.
Who the fuck are we doing next?
I don't remember. You have to leave me a memento. Oh, damn.
Yeah. All right.
Anyway, that was a good one. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed. See you in the next one. Bye.